The Speaker.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen, Amen, Namaste.
Oath or affirmation, announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, Mr. Esmond Ford, MP, member for Tunapuna, Dr. Fuad Khan, MP, member for Barata Sanwan, and Mr. David Lee, MP, member for Pointe-a-Pierre, have asked to be excused from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the members seek is granted. Honorable members, I have received the following correspondence from the Vice President of the Senate, dated 14th June 2017. Dear Honorable Speaker, establishment of the Joint Select Committee. I wish to advise that at a sitting held on Tuesday, June 13th, 2017, the Senate concurred with the House by agreeing to the following resolutions. 1. Resolve that a Joint Select Committee be established to consider the first report of the committee established to review the levels of health care delivery by the regional health authorities and to rationalize the system of public sector doctors in private practice, as well as the second report of the committee to review the levels of health care delivery by the regional health authorities and to rationalize the system of public sector doctors in private practice, laid in the House of Representatives on November 9, 2016 and March 24, 2017, respectively. That this committee be mandated to A, review and analyze the reports, B, consider the findings and recommendations considered in the report, and C, report its observations and recommendations no later than June 30th, 2017. 2, resolved that a Joint Select Committee be established to consider the draft National Development Strategy 2016-2030, Vision 2030. That this Joint Select Committee be mandated to A, review and analyze the draft National Development Strategy 2016-2030, Vision 2030. B, consider the recommendations considered in the draft National Development Strategy 2016-2030, Vision 2030, and C, report its recommendations for the development of a national development plan no later than June 21st, 2017. Accordingly, I respectfully request that the House of Representatives be informed of this decision at the earliest convenience, please. Respectfully, Senator Nigel De Freitas, Vice President of the Senate.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I have the honor to lay the following paper: the audited financial statements of the National Flour Mills Limited for the financial year ended December 31st, 2016. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that paper 1 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee.
Honorable members, the question is that paper 1 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. All in favor say aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay on the table the following paper: the Trinidad and Tobago Gas Master Plan Final Report. And Madam Speaker, I beg to move that paper number 2 be referred to the Joint Select Committee on Energy Affairs.
Honorable members, the question is that paper number 2 be referred to the Joint Select Committee on Energy Affairs. All in favor, say aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Minister of Housing and Urban Development.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following papers: the Trinidad and Tobago Housing Development Corporation Vesting Amendment to the First Schedule Order 2017, the Trinidad and Tobago Housing Development Corporation Vesting Amendment to the First Schedule Number 2 Order 2017, the Trinidad and Tobago Housing Development Corporation Vesting Amendment to the First Schedule Number 3 Order 2017.
Reports from committees, Prime Minister's questions, urgent questions.
The member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Health, in light of reports that the Rochard Douglas Health Center was shut down on June 12, 2017 due to an infestation of numerous vermin, could the Minister indicate the definitive action that will be taken to ensure citizens will receive necessary medical attention in the community?
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to answer this urgent question. I can state categorically that the Rochard Douglas Health Center was not shut down on Monday due to vermin. The center last week was identified to have a sanitation problem due to bat droppings. The center was proactively cleaned over the weekend of 10th and 11th, which is last weekend, but there was residual odor, and that is why we had to close the center. What is shocking about this, and service resumed yesterday as promised, what is shocking about this, Madam Speaker, is the absolute neglect of this health center over the past few years. It is only this administration, under this Prime Minister and under this Minister of Health, is paying attention to health centers like the Rochard Douglas. The last administration's health agenda was built on one facility to deify one person. This administration has issued a contract to fix the Rochard Douglas Health Center once and for all, because those people deserve better health care than was provided for them recently. And I can tell you, due to that neglect, the tenders have been out, and the works are going to be done and completed within 3 to 4 weeks' time. It's 3 to 4 months, sorry. During that period, the good people will be accessing their health care through the Lengua Health Facility. Because this administration does not discriminate, and we are not putting all our eggs in one basket when it comes to the delivery of health care. We recognize that we have to fix a lot of health centers and do a lot of work in a lot of hospitals. Thank you very much.
Supplemental?
Yes,
Oropouche
Honorable
West.
Minister, under whose jurisdiction does this Rochard Douglas Road Health Center fit? Is it the Southwest Territory? And what was their function with respect to?
Minister.
The Rochard Douglas Health Center, as you know, and I know, falls under the jurisdiction of the Southwest Regional Health Authority. And under your watch, or the last administration, little or no attention was paid to it. We, this P&M government, is now paying attention to the Rochard Douglas Health Center. And as I indicated, when I saw the conditions there, I said this has to be fixed. Has to be fixed. And therefore, as I said, the contracts are out and the facility will be fixed.
Member for Princestown.
Thank You, Madam Speaker, supplemented to the Honourable Minister. Honourable Minister, in light of the construction or the repair work that will take place at the Rochard Douglas, you have indicated that Lengua facility would be used. Could you give us an idea of what reinforcement will be provided at Lengua, seeing that they too have had many challenges with respect to lack of medication and problems at that facility of recent?
I would not allow that. That's not a supplemental question. Member for Caroni Central.
Sorry, Madam Speaker. Could the Minister please give an update on solutions to the current closure of the Presal Government School?
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Presal Government Primary School was experiencing sewer problems that caused an unbearable scent. This was attended to and the works were completed around May this year. However, it seems as though the scent has returned, and only today we receive information that because of the unbearable scent, parents are keeping their children home. Immediately, we instructed EFCL to pay a visit to the school tomorrow at 9 a.m. to effect the necessary repairs. Thank you very much.
Member for Caroni Central.
Yes. Minister, through you, Madam Speaker, as you yourself indicated, this is a problem that has been attended to and not going away. There is also a new school. Yes, I'm going to ask the question,
yes,
Madam Speaker, but I must outline the question. There is a new school that is 60% complete near to it. Can the solution involve, Mr. Minister of Education, the completion of the new school?
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. As I had indicated some time ago, the Ministry of Education has identified 10 schools that require urgent attention. The Presal Government Primary School was not among those 10, simply because that school was only 40% complete. Those schools that we have identified were in the region of 90 to 95% complete. And this is the reason why we have shifted the priority so that we are going to look at the Presal Government Primary School in the next fiscal year. Thank you.
Whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In the absence of my colleague, who is currently in the traffic, the member for Naparima, to the Minister of Works and Transport. Given that rainy season has started, could the Minister state the works, if any, that have been done to treat with the numerous landslips in both the Garth Road and Barakpur areas?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this year the Ministry completed an inventory of all the landslips which exist throughout Trinidad and Tobago. That is approximately 800. There are about 9 landslips between the Garth Road and the Barakpur area. The Ministry, through its landslip program, has identified 30 landslips based on the most critical at this stage, and that is in the stage of the design for stage of the tendering process. What the Ministry has in place, based on the critical nature of the other landslips, we do shoring and drainage to ensure that the slippage is controlled on the rest of the landslips. Thank you.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Social Development and Family Services, could the Minister clarify for all recipients of senior citizen pension, public assistance grants, and disability grants whether the avenue of the direct deposit system will be the only option available to access the said grants as of June 2017 and beyond?
Social Development and Family Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Direct Deposit Initiative was relaunched in June 2017 for all recipients of the social welfare grants. These are recipients of the Senior Citizen Pension, Public Assistance Grant, and Disability Assistance Grant. Applicants will be placed on the direct deposit system on a phased basis as applications are processed, and the Ministry expects to complete the exercise by December 2017. In the interim, beneficiaries will continue to be paid by check. Madam Speaker, the Ministry recognizes, however, that some persons either do not have or may never be able to open accounts with banks or credit unions. And so we anticipate that 5% of our 102,000 recipients will continue to be paid by check.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a supplemental. Is the Minister aware that at certain district offices and so on, officers of her ministry are insisting that persons submit bank statements, not bank accounts, bank statements, and members of staff are insisting that they present bank statements with a history, like 6 months and quarterly statements and so on. So if this is happening, and I was actually present in a district office with my mother who went to sign off her license.
Member, it's the question.
The question is to provide clarification, and is she aware that this is happening?
Social Development and Family Services.
Madam Speaker, I am not aware of any such situation, and I wish to inform this House and the general public that that is not a requirement. Given that the member for Couva South has indicated that it has taken place, it will be investigated, and our members of staff will be informed, and we will reinforce the fact that they are not to request bank statements from our customers.
Member for Oropouche East. Member for Oropouche East.
To the Minister of Finance. In light of the response to an urgent question on June 9, 2017, could the Minister indicate the circumstances surrounding the provision of security for the Chairman of the National Lotteries Control Board by the NLCB?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in June 2016, the board of the NLCB approved the move to suspend all recurrent sponsorship arrangements pending the conduct of an audit by NLCB's Marketing and Public Relations Department on the validity of recurrent sponsorships. As a result of this move, the chairman of NLCB received a number of threats, which he took seriously. He proceeded to retain his own personal security services. He brought this to the attention of his board members in August 2016. His board members, having been told of the threats and his security concerns, they instructed and insisted that he broach his security concerns with the director of the NLCB. After that, certain decisions were taken, and he was provided with security services until November 2016, at which time it ceased.
Could the Minister indicate whether the chairman, having received these threats, took any steps to report it to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service?
If there is a report. Madam Speaker, I am in receipt of no such information. I don't know the answer to that.
Member for Oropouche.
Could the Minister indicate, as Acting Minister of Finance now, what was the cost to the taxpayer for the provision of such security?
Acting Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, that was not in the original question. I don't have that information.
Questions on notice, questions for oral answer.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we will be answering all questions.
Member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 145 to the Minister of Public Utilities.
Minister of Public Utilities.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, any such development is in a broad sense always possible. This possibility, however, has not been contemplated and therefore not assessed to date. The likelihood, therefore, does not arise. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Oropouche.
Question number 146 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, members of the Police Manpower Audit Committee were presented with the instruments of appointment in January 2017 and were given a mandate to produce a report for the submission to Cabinet by March 31st, 2017. The committee's status report was submitted to Cabinet on March 28, 2017. That report outlined the work the committee had been undertaken since its establishment, along with its major preliminary findings and its proposed schedule in fulfilling its mandate. The committee also recommended revised terms of reference, which, inter alia, divided the exercise into 3 phases: Phase 1, analysis; Phase 2, design; and Phase 3, implementation. The stated report and revised terms of reference were approved by Cabinet, which also agreed to extend the life of the committee to a period of 9 months with effect from April 1st, 2017. Pursuant to Cabinet's decision, Madam Speaker, the Manpower Audit Committee has continued in the implementation of its mandate and as at May 31st, 2017, was pursuing activities outlined in Phase 1 of the exercise. This consists of an intense data gathering exercise, inclusive of examining the current operational environment of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the effectiveness of policies, practices, and procedures, community-level perception of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and conducting consultations with various stakeholders to identify core and emergent issues of the public and the organization. The submission of the final report is to be delivered to Cabinet by the 31st of December, 2017, Madam Speaker.
Member for Caroni.
I thought the fact that recently published on the newspaper that in one of the consultations only one person attended the entire consultation on the manpower audit. Are you in a position to tell this House whether that type of consultation will continue, bearing in mind the lack of public confidence in that consultation?
Minister of National Security.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't know how the member could assume that there's a lack of public confidence based on that situation, but the onus is based on the chairman of the Manpower Audit Committee to continue as he so feels, Madam Speaker.
For Oropouche.
Much to the Minister. Minister, could you indicate the estimated cost to the taxpayer of this entire exercise?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, I don't have that figure. I can get that when provided a little later.
Minister, member of Oropouche.
Is the Minister suggesting that the government has embarked upon this very critical project without knowing the estimated cost?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, I never said I don't know. I said that I don't have the figure at this point in time because it was not part of the original question.
Order.
It was not part of the original question, Madam Speaker, and therefore I don't have.
Member for Caroni.
Just to give an idea of the expected date of completion of this manpower audit, if it's possible.
Minister of National Security.
Indicated in my answers a while ago that the manpower audit has been given up to the 31st of December 2017. So the report going to be before or after that time.
Member for Oropouche East.
Madam Speaker, question number 147 to the Honorable Attorney General.
Attorney General.
Speaker, there is no cost to date.
Member for Oropouche East.
Is the very distinguished Attorney General aware that in the aftermath of the report of the Commission of Inquiry, the Attorney General is in the newspaper as quoting advice received from Senior Counsel Fayed Hussein?
Yes, I am.
Could the Attorney General indicate free advice and on what basis free advice was tendered to the Honorable Attorney General?
There is no cost to date.
Thank you. Whip, question 148.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question 148 in the absence of the member for Point Appear, to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Madam Speaker, Petrotrin has recognized the urgent need for improving storage tank integrity. From the period 2003 to present, 21 storage tanks have been repaired, and a tank repair strategy was approved by the board in September 2016, and is currently being implemented. Repair contracts are presently being prepared for 4 additional storage tanks. Contracts have been awarded for 7 storage tanks to be cleaned in preparation for inspection over the period 2017 to 2019. In addition, Madam Speaker, visual inspection of the tanks at Pointe-à-Pierre were conducted as follows. In the year 2015, 88% of all tanks. In the year 2016, 100% of all tanks. And in the year 2017, 51% to date, and we expect the entire 100% of the tanks will be visually inspected by the end of this year.
Member for Caroni, supplemental.
Could the minister clarify what you mean by visually inspected? Is it a structural integrity inspection, or is it just looking at it and seeing it?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Visual is visual. We have experienced eyes that go out because that is the lowest end of the inspection process. Beyond that, it calls for instrumentation, X-ray diffraction, and some of these other technologies. But visual inspection is a trained eye looking and looking for potential breaches in the tank system.
Member for Caroni East.
Bearing that in mind, do you intend to pursue the greater structural integrity assessment of these tanks, and when? And what's the completion time?
Obviously, yes, Madam Speaker, and that is on a phase basis. That includes tremendous costs. So we have a risk analysis system where the tanks that has the greatest potential of failure undergo these robust testing.
The Whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 149 to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Madam Speaker, Petrotrin has established an asset integrity management system to ensure asset integrity. This system has already been implemented in its exploration and production division and is expected to be rolled out soon in its refinery and marketing division. The asset integrity management program will include the following. 1, identifying and managing the highest priority risk in each processing unit. 2, developing corrosion control documents, also called CCD, for each process unit. 3, comprehensive piping inspection program. 4, use of integrity operating windows, also called IOW. 5, management of change processes. 6, learning from incidents, acronym LFI. 7, record keeping and data analysis, which is ongoing. And 8, and probably most importantly, training and knowledge transfer for all those in the role of maintaining equipment integrity.
The Whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 151 to the Minister of Trade and Industry.
Minister of Trade and Industries.
Thank you. In response to Part E, yes, the review and audit exercise was completed. Part B, the overall objective of the review and audit exercise was to determine if registered foreign used car dealers met all the conditions of their dealerships and whether they were operating legitimately. The findings of the exercise revealed that out of a total of 385 dealers surveyed, 335 dealers, or 87% of dealers, were in full compliance with the foreign used car dealership system. 16 dealers, or 4.2% of dealers, had outstanding documents to be submitted. 25% dealers, or 6.5% of dealers, were not in compliance due to various pending matters. And 9 dealers, or 2.3% of dealers, were deregistered and hence removed from the list of registered dealers.
Member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 158 to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Madam Speaker, during the course of its response to the oil spill, the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industry sought confirmation from the Venezuelan authorities regarding details relating to this report. However, to date, no further information has been provided. No official report or communication regarding this matter has been received by the government of Trinidad and Tobago from the Republic of Venezuela.
Member for Caroni East.
Bearing in mind this oil spill, have there been any discussions between Petrotrin or the government and the Venezuelan government based on the reports that have circulated on the oil spill in Venezuela?
I will allow that as a supplemental question. Member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 159 to the Minister of Agriculture and Land and Fisheries.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in light of the discovery of turtle parts in Tobago, I am advised by the Tobago House of Assembly that the following measures have been implemented to increase the protection of turtles. 1. Joint patrols between officers of the Environmental Police Unit attached to the EMA with officers attached to the Department of Marine Resources and Fisheries and the Department of Natural Resources and Forestry, Tobago House of Assembly. 2. Production and installation of signage on all turtle nesting beaches, advising of the laws and penalty regarding turtles. 3. Meeting with fisher folk whose livelihood may be impacted, as turtles are usually caught as bycatch in their nets. 4. A program of education and media interaction. 5. The THA is looking at hotspots and concentrating on specific areas, especially around harvest festivals. And finally, the THA is improving monitoring and patrolling capabilities. Thank you very much.
Member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 160 to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
It seems as I have to come back into this house, Madam Speaker.
Oh, yes.
The estimated cost for major asset integrity upgrades of Petrotrin's aging infrastructure were derived from engineering reports and assessment by company's personnel and are included in the company's 5-year forecast. The costs for the upgrades are reviewed each year during the company's budgetary cycle.
Statements by ministers, personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that Mr. Stuart Young be appointed to serve on the Joint Select Committee on Energy Affairs in lieu of Mrs. Ayana Webster Roy. Thank you very much.
Honorable members, the question is that Mr. Stuart Young be appointed to serve on the Joint Select Committee on Energy Affairs in lieu of Mrs. Ayana Webster Roy. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
Public business, government business, bills second reading.
Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 450, to introduce a system of traffic violations for certain breaches of the Act, to provide for the implementation of a red light camera system, a demerit point system, and the reform of the fixed penalty system and related legal proceedings and other related matters be now read a second time. Madam Speaker, I'm very pleased to continue the government's reform exercise with respect to our criminal justice system. This bill, before this House, now having passed through the Senate, is the continuation of the series of steps to deal with the administration of justice, this time specifically dealing with a multiple range of issues, starting from where the appropriate use of judicial time should be allocated. Secondly, how the police service should be deployed and focused. Thirdly, focusing upon the lawful user of the roads of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Next, broadening the ease of administration of justice and the ease of doing business for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Carrying us next into the compliance as a society with the laws of our country in general. We're dealing with two principal pieces of law which stand as the current law of Trinidad and Tobago. On the first limb, we have the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850. That is an Act of Parliament number 42 of 1934. It was enacted on the 1st of January 1935. It is now some 82 years old. Has been amended some 94 times, and the last of the amendments that we saw was in 2015 by Act number 2 of 2015. We also have on the second limb the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Enforcement and Administration Act, Chapter 4852. That is Act number 18 of 1978. It was amended some 10 times, last in 2011, and it is that particular piece of law which deals with the enforcement provisions where we find what people refer to as fixed penalty offenses. The architecture of the original law is still fairly robust. We have, over the years as a country, seen the improvement of the laws by the introduction of, for instance, seatbelt laws, breathalyzer provisions. Those are two pieces of law that stand out in particular. That matrix has come under consideration by successive regimes. By my count, in the last 10th Republican Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago and the 9th Republican Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, a UNC administration and a PNM administration, at least 5 ministers of works and transport have attempted a significant reform exercise for these laws, otherwise referred to as the Motor Vehicle Authority, and parent laws to go with that. Regrettably, Madam Speaker, that exercise of a complete overhaul of that law involved too far an approach. And really, the exercise is one which should have been divided, much as the introduction of breathalyzers and seatbelts were, and most recently, the introduction of speed guns. It is in fact with the introduction of the speed gun technology that Trinidad and Tobago wrestled with the first time the experience of law-changing culture. And that law-changing culture philosophy is one which has worked very well. If you look to the pronouncements of the Arrive Alive team in particular, you will notice that road fatalities have been on the descent. And there's no small chance of association there. In fact, it's squarely associated there. The breathalyzer also caused a significant amount of improvement on our roads. So in Trinidad and Tobago, dealing with laws some 82 years old, we have seen an experimentation with the laws which has taught us that one ought to take the approach of common sense into the reform of laws. And this bill is commonsensical for a number of reasons. First of all, it is a matter of record that successive Chief Justices have spoken to, on a constant basis, the need to apply common sense to the use of judicial time. And this bill proposes, as a square feature of that, a recognition that our society is crying out for judicial time to be dealt with on the focus against criminality, conviction, and passage through the courts. We have come forward in the environment of the number of bills that we have put together, and I need only remind that we're dealing with the abolition of committal proceedings or preliminary inquiries. We are dealing with the introduction of a plea bargaining system. We are dealing with the ease of access to bail. We are dealing with the introduction by way of election of judge-only trials. We have dealt with the implementation of the criminal procedure rules. which deal with the sit and rise time of caseloads in the magistracy. And this bill now proposes to look at the large elephant in the room, which is the existence of 100,000 cases in the magistracy of Trinidad and Tobago, and to squarely say to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, let us decriminalize certain offenses, convert them into violations, let us treat with them by bettering the access to management of the solutions to this, by applying the use of technology, by applying electronic payments, by removing the jurisdictional boundaries with respect to where you are given a charge, and therefore the confines that you must pay that charge in the jurisdiction that you got it. For instance, you get a speeding ticket in Mayaro, you live in Tobago, you have to pay the speeding ticket in Mayaro. And what we say, coming through the judicial statistics, is important. And therefore, I must put onto the record of this House where we stand as a country. Now, I just referenced approximately 100,000 cases in the magistracy. The fact is that our magistracy is comprised of a very limited pool of resources. We have in our magistracy 48 sitting magistrates, 38 of whom sit in the criminal courts. We have 9 judges sitting in the criminal high court. We have a total of 30 judges in Trinidad and Tobago at the high court level and 11 justices of appeal. We have 14 main magisterial courts and 3 out courts. We are seeing that the disposition rate in the magistracy is 0.49. In other words, 49%. Every year, 51% of the cases that come to the magistracy go into the backlog. On average, there are anywhere between 126,000 cases per year up to a higher amount of 140-odd thousand per year passing through the magistracy. We see that we have statistical information which shows us that our preliminary inquiries, that our indictable offenses are showing, in particular on the criminal side, that only 6% of the people who are charged on a yearly basis are in fact given a verdict by a court. 6% only. The other 94% of people who are subject of charge find themselves going into the backlog. And Trinidad and Tobago, wrestling with a crime situation, having spent in a 7-year period approximately $26 billion in main ministries alone. In fact, in the period 2010 to 2015, the sum across 5 ministries alone was $26 million. When you add the cost on the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service for 7 years, you're looking at close to $15 billion. When you add the two together and you average out a 6-year period, going backwards as a country, we've spent close to $40 billion on the criminal justice system. And the average person in Trinidad and Tobago now says, well, what have I got to show in terms of efficiency for that kind of expenditure? Hence the reference to the annual reports year on year from the judiciary, which says, please apply common sense. Statistically, in the judiciary, in the magistracies, in the magisterial districts, excluding San Fernando and Tobago, there are currently 67,925 matters. I'm told that the statistics for San Fernando and Tobago added take it up to approximately 100,000 matters. But when we look to the reasons that these matters are now in arrears, it was quite interesting. 64,435 matters, coming out of a total of a yearly distribution of 88,000 matters, 64,000 odd matters are dealt with by a result of delay because of the non-appearance of a complainant and a defendant. So the parties just don't turn up to court. The current system of law is that if you break the offenses specified in Chapter 4850, the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, if you break those offenses, everything is a crime. You must have an offense, a charge is offered against you, you must have a warrant or a summons served upon you by a policeman. That policeman must turn up in court. That policeman must stay in court. The defendant must appear in court. The matter is listed. A plea is entered, either guilty or not guilty. Guilty, you get your sentence. Not guilty, you have a trial start. 100,000 cases currently occupy that structured approach. But 64,000 odd are adjourned on a continuous basis because the policeman or the defendant didn't turn up. Reasons related to the defendant squarely. For instance, the defendant has complications, you have not had service in particular. That's approximately 12,688 matters. That means 12,688 policemen have to go and find a defendant to effect service. When we look to the fact of a defendant dealing with delays on account of his attorney not being there, of not being subject of being found where a warrant is issued, because if after you're summoned and you don't appear, the magistrate then goes to the position of issuing a warrant. We're talking about thousands of man-hours, hundreds of thousands of man-hours per year just involved in the system of administering traffic offenses. But let's look further. When we look to this position, let's look to what happens where we actually find the people. We've been told by the judiciary that of the 68,000 odd, excluding Tobago and San Fernando, that there are matters in there, traffic offenses, with some as long outstanding as 11 years and more. 11 years and more. But when we look to the percentage of actual success, we invest 100% of effort. We have to put in 100% of police time to get there. We have to do summonses, we have to do appearances, we have to do warrants. But when we get to the actual success rate, we're seeing, if you take the average over the years, we're actually seeing a mix of successes. And when we look to the percentage success rate, it's anywhere between 30% to 60%. So you spend 100% of the resources, and 30 to 60% of those resources come back on average year on year. Some years it's 33%, some years 40%, some years 60% success rate. But you definitely have up to 70 to 40% non-success rate. The actual sums collected in the period 2010 to 2015 accumulate to approximately $250 million. So if you average it out and you take a 40% success rate, you're collecting $250 million, but you're spending vast amounts of money on causing compliance to the laws. So what does this bill actually do? This bill says that we should take a systemic approach of reform. We should allow the judges of the magistracy, the puny judges, the magistrates, because you have rights of appeal as well, the Court of Appeal may come in. So let's look at the magistracy in main focus. Take the 100,000 cases out of the category of offenses and convert them to violations. So the first point of this bill is to convert offenses, and not all offenses, into traffic violations. Specifically, it's important to refer members to Chapter 4850, and in Chapter 4850, you will note, if you compare the bill to the parent law, that we are not treating with serious offenses such as driving under the influence of alcohol in Section 70 of the parent law, driving or being in charge of a vehicle where you are dealing with drugs in your system, 70A, 70 for drugs and 70A for under the influence of alcohol. We are not causing any effect to causing death by dangerous driving, careless driving, being Section 71, 71A, and 72. So we preserve the serious matters as offenses at law, subject to the criminal management of that. The Summary Courts Act tells us how we are to treat with criminal matters. And what we are doing in this bill, in large part, is to take the first rubric into effect, decriminalize clauses 1 to 33 and 36 to 47, deal with the essence of the bill on decriminalization. We take all things that are listed as offenses and we convert them into violations. What we do in clause 9 and in clause 25 in particular is that we create certain cornerstones for the law to operate on. And very importantly, when we look to clause 9, we are establishing 3 new sections into law. We're dealing with the creation of section 20A, section 20B, and section 20C. And these are cornerstones for the operation of the law. What we propose in 20A is the prescription where compliance with the Act and other written laws relating to the use of a motor vehicle on the road is a condition of the registration of the motor vehicle, and the owner of the motor vehicle is responsible for any breach of the Act. Secondly, in 20B, we now provide a new concept where we introduce the traffic violation. That new concept says that if you breach the 7th schedule, the provisions of violation, as we describe them in the new clauses 34 and 35, those matters for which you will be treated with a violation, be they red light enforcement, be they fixed penalty matters, that what we're going to do is we're going to hold the holder of a permit or the owner of a vehicle as the person who has constituted the bite-in for that violation. What we do, we create the distinction between a traffic violation and an offense, and we separate out the fact that offenses still exist. So we're not taking all offenses, in particular serious offenses, out. In clause 9, in introducing a new section 20C, what we do is we set the balance, the burden of proof in the court. We remove it from the criminal offense, which is a proof beyond reasonable doubt, and we convert it now to a balance of probabilities. So clause 9 in the introduction of a new 20A, 20B, and 20C stands as a cornerstone feature. Now, several members of the opposition in the Senate raised the issue of constitutionality in relation to this. And there was the allegation that one needed to treat with this sort of amendment by a 3/5 majority, because there was an argument put forward that in creating violations and having someone ultimately responsible for a violation where your driver's license or your vehicle registration could be removed from you, that there was somehow a treatment of a right to property or a right to fair hearing or a right to process. And it is true that the Constitution in the fundamental rights sections 4 and 5 do treat with property rights, but it is necessary to treat with the constitutional argument in the following context. The fact is that we do have a right to fair hearing. We do have a right to property. We do have a right to equality of treatment. But the law is very, very clear that all rights are conditional rights. Even fundamental rights are conditional rights. They are not absolute rights. And it is a matter of fact that observance of the laws of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago is a requirement of law, whether it is under contract, whether it is under license. A driver's license is a license to drive. It is not a right to drive. The conditionality of road usage has been statutorily treated with as a conditionality subject to revocation at many points by the licensing authority or under a court. And therefore we submit and hold to the principle that one does not need to only look to cases like Surujrattan and the dicta of Baroness Hale of Richmond in recognizing that the law is a conditional creature, that fundamental rights are conditional factors, that not every right which touches and concerns a fundamental right is one which must be treated with special majority vote or Section 13 consideration. but the part of the dicta which treats with the observation that you are merely restating the law in its current sense, that you are going no further than you need to, that there is an element of proportionality, those aspects of constitutional consideration fall into this bill. And we are not going any further than the existing law, because the ability to revoke a license or the privilege that the state has in telling you that you're permitted to drive on the road is the existing law. That is to be balanced by the mechanisms of due process which we introduce into this bill, because in this concept of the bill, we are taking any allegation of a traffic violation. We are firstly taking it to the person against whom the violation is going to be put, be it the owner or the driver of the vehicle. We are then telling those persons, you have the right to contest the application. We are no longer telling the courts of Trinidad and Tobago, take an offense, take the criminal law, go and find the person, serve the person, take a warrant to the person if they don't appear, stand up in court all day. We are saying to the person against whom the violation is put, you, if you have a problem with the violation, summons yourself to court. You bring yourself to court by a notice to contest, and only when you have brought yourself to court will the court convene and will the court call for the persons who have to be in court. Now, there was a very curious argument raised by some members of the Senate that the provisions in the bill which allow for the magistrate to proceed in absentia, ex parte, where the person does not come to court, that was somehow a new feature of the law. When I looked to Chapter 420, the Summary Courts Act, and Section 44 in particular, the provisions where a magistrate is allowed to proceed in absentia are to be found right there. In that provision of the law, the person must be summoned to court. The person must not have appeared in court after there's been proof of service, and then the magistrate is allowed to proceed in the absence of the person who's accused. It's exactly the same. Instead of having a summons and proof of service and occupying police time and judicial time, we tell the violator, you summons yourself. So when you summons yourself to court and you turn up in court at your own request, there's no need for proof of service because you've done it yourself. You've told the court, I want you to move the court. And therefore, I found the argument posed by the opposition to be a very difficult argument to understand, most respectfully. We come next in this whole process of due process, not only to consider the fact that the person has the right to go to the court under a notice to contest, but we've provided prescriptive time frames by which this happened. And in providing those time frames, we are not in the vacuum of having a court say, as soon as is reasonably practicable. We've actually gone a step in the right direction in natural justice by providing specific time frames. And that's another improvement to constitutionality and proportionality. We have gone further. We have said that after your whole process in the courts where you contest the matter, you have the option to have another bite at the cherry. Because after your violation has been brought against you, demerit points come against you, a fine comes against you, a fixed penalty fine, it doesn't stop there. The next step is for it to go to the licensing authority. And then the licensing authority considers that matter and issues you with a notice, the violator, and invites you to say, please come and show cause why you should not receive the effects of your own breach. So we have gone a step in the right direction relative to due process, relative to the rights of fair hearing, relative to fair hearing and natural justice combined, and therefore we have improved the law well within the rationale offered by Baroness Hale in the Surratt case, and generally in the proportionality principles considered in cases such as Northern Construction, in particular in our Court of Appeal, and other dicta in the Privy Council. That's dealing with decriminalization. That's passing through with constitutionality. The next objective of the bill is to treat with the introduction of novel concepts. In particular, clauses 34 and 35 deal with the introduction of the red light camera enforcement system in clause 34, and in clause 35, we are dealing with demerit points and fixed penalty provisions. Now, I'd like to make this as simple as possible. We are taking in the new clause 34 in the introduction of red light provisions, the use of technology. We have on statistical point in the experimentation of the introduction of these cameras right here at the Parliament. We have over 4,000 breaches kicking in to our Parliament. 4,000 breaches of the red light camera. And that is no small event. If you break a red light, there's somebody who's going to be on a green light. It has resulted in death. It has resulted in disaster. It has resulted in lawlessness. We say to the country, take use of technology which everywhere in the world is operationalizing. Take that technology, mount your cameras up, provide for the system of certification of the technology by the inspector. Let that stand as prima facie evidence of its functionality, exactly as we do for the breathalyzer, exactly as we do for the speed guns. Use that same system of proportionality. Have that system stand. You pass through the red light camera catches your number plate. Your number plate refers to the owner of the car, and the owner of the car, within a 30-day period after that offense happens, receives a ticket in the mail or a violation in the mail. We allow for the payment of that violation online. We allow for it in places other than the court where the matter occurred, the jurisdiction in which it occurred. We are allowing for it in approved payees, which will include banks and other entities. And we allow for the person to still contest the application. We take this red light enforcement technology, we separate it out from other traffic signs and violations. We treat with it by way of consequential amendments. But we are now moving in the right direction because we're not only holding the owner of the car liable, but we're giving the statutory right to the owner of the car to bring proceedings and recover debt or recover penalty or recover the consequence of the violation from the driver. So that includes taxis, that includes rental cars. Much like in the United States, when you pass under a SunPass system or a red light system and you're in a rental car, they automatically, the rental agency, upon receiving the violation, deduct it from your credit card. Quite simple. So we're not introducing into law anything which doesn't exist in other jurisdictions. As we mentioned jurisdictions, I should note that we have reflected against the laws of Jamaica, against the laws of Canada, the United States of America, the United Kingdom, parts of Australia, and we've sought to harmonize this experience in terms of law. The next feature of law that we deal with, as I mentioned, in clause 35 of the bill, is where we introduce the demerit point system and the fixed penalty system. And what we're doing in the demerit point system is where the second piece of law that I referred to comes in. In 1979, there was an experimentation to introduce demerit points. Demerit points came in Chapter 4852, the enforcement arm of this law, the motor vehicle and road traffic enforcement provisions. The demerit points were intended to be introduced by way of regulations, and in the period 1979 to 2017, no regulations have been approved. No regulations have been done. And what we did is to take the whole substance of the Chapter 4852 and incorporate it into the parent law, which is Chapter 4850. That's why we're repealing Chapter 4852. We are introducing in the demerit points model, which you will see expressed in the 9th schedule, we are introducing into that and into the 7th schedule the existing law which is to be found in the 1st schedule of Chapter 4852. We're taking it word for word in the regulations. I want to caution honorable members not to look to the side margin of what the law says. One must look to the regulations themselves because the side margin is deceiving. When you read the regulation itself, it makes good sense in relation to what is noise or what is a rear view mirror, a reflecting mirror. One has to read the actual regulation itself, and for ease for honorable senators, in the Senate when we piloted, and now in the House. We can circulate a matrix which will show you exactly what the existing law is, what the regulation says. But I'm very pleased to say that in the Senate we went through this line by line and made amendments where we could. Because there is an express undertaking on the floor of the Senate, which I will repeat now, that we are renovating the entire schedule. And that renovation can be done by a mixture between minister's order and regulations which are subject to negative resolution. It is dangerous to pull at the thread in the tapestry without knowing the consequences. And I'm pleased to also confirm that what we have done is to take the actual offenses, now violations, in respect of which there are demerit points, and we are going through them methodically to compare whether they are actually used or not. The Honorable Prime Minister raised to me the concept of taxi driver being appropriately attired. But what was required was to actually go to the application of the laws in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and Licensing Authority and look for whether it is actually implemented or not. And we have taken year on year, and we are now going to prune that schedule to make it sensible and to bring it into the modern age. And we expect to finish that exercise in the month of September so that we can lay the improvements to that particular piece of law. Let's talk a little bit further on clause 35. Madam Speaker, would you just remind me, I've been sitting in both houses, I confuse the times in both. What time do I end?
You end at 2:48:40.
Regular time or full?
Full 45 minutes.
2:40.
2:40.
Thank you. So 4 minutes.
2:48:40.
2:48. Thank you. 10 minutes. 12 minutes. Thank you. So what we have done in clause 35 in respect of the improvements to the fixed penalty system I've just described, mixed in with the demerit systems. Now, when we're looking to clause 35, we must also match up clause 47. Clause 47 invokes the schedule. Clause 35 treats with the actual new structures of the law that we are introducing. When we're looking to the red light enforcement, the provisions to be compared side by side, the cornerstones are clause 25 and clause 34. So, in summary, honorable members are looking to clause 9, the new architecture, the new 20A, 20B, 20C. We are next looking to clause 25 together with clause 34, and there we're talking red light enforcement. We are next looking to clause 35 and clause 47, and that's where we marry the schedules and the methodology by which we get to where we're going. So the aims are decriminalization, red light enforcement, demerit points, fixed penalty system. Now, I must now speak to the operationalization of this law. In preparation for the launch of this law, and in the launch of law which is to come in September, what I can say is that we had a phenomenal interagency operational team. Licensing Authority, Ministry of Works and Transport, Attorney General's Office, Judiciary, the Traffic Police, the payee arms of the government from the Ministry of Finance. We sat on a round table comprising approximately 35 bodies, and then we looked at how we need to operationalize this law. And when we looked to the operationalization of the law, we went even further. We ensured that at the Ministry of Works Licensing Division, Traffic Management, that we spoke to the readiness for cameras. We spoke to the serviceability for the cameras. We now have a historical record as to how they work, how they don't work, what the functionality looks like. 4,000 plus there. We went further and we matrixed out how to operationalize the communication between on the ground, where the policeman stops you or traffic warden stops you, because we've beefed up and provided teeth to traffic wardens in this bill. We've allowed for a breach of a traffic warden's direction to be treated with sanction, finally giving them teeth so that they would be the subject of obedience by the population and not ridicule. And what we have said there is how do we connect the on-the-ground system with the court system? And we have taken a leaf out of the Jamaican experience. I personally went to Jamaica, sat down with the Ministry of Works and Transport equivalent there and their licensing authority there, and witnessed the software which they have implemented, which is basically software which originated out of Illuminat, now Massey, and which their version, the Jamaican version of iGov TT, has operationalized. We have gone into the judiciary. We've done the matrix as to how to operationalize the wide area network and local area networks. We've done the process flows. We have done the budget estimation. It'll cost us only 597,000 odd TT dollars to operationalize the judiciary arm of it. We have already done the protocols between the payees, that is the banks, etc., to cause the reconciliation of accounts when you're paying your violations. And most sincerely and most importantly, we have gone to the licensing division. We have backfilled all of the data which was outstanding for motor vehicle registration between the period 2010 to 2015, all of it. We have done all of the driving permit information data entry. The Ministry of Works and Transport has introduced a new driver's license with better security features, etc. So now we have driver's permits, vehicle registration, but that is going to be introduced on the back of a very significant reform which is coming to this Parliament, and that is the introduction by way of regulations of a new system of license plates. And that new system of license plates involves the RFID license plates. And why do we do that? We do that because we will be able to deal with fraud in the licensing authority, fake plates, change plates. We will be able to improve the operationalization of laws because we are introducing in 2 successive steps to come very shortly spot cameras on arches right across our nationways. Spot cameras and speed cameras which now take us out of handheld devices for speed, which has done significantly well in the speed gun introduction. Now spot cameras on every archway, on every bridge, on every position in Trinidad and Tobago, added into the RFID tags. And that, honorable members, is something which has been talked about in this country for years, but not operationalized, despite the best intentions. Because I do admit, in particular, when we in 2015 dealt with the law brought then by Minister Stephen Cadiz to try and treat with a new motor vehicle authority and system, what the approach that failed demonstrated, I don't think through the minister's own fault, was a failure to apply the common sense approach. It makes sense to just carve out the manageable features and apply them and operationalize them. And Madam Speaker, if I could tell you, that is the exact approach that the government has taken in everything that we are doing. I want to put onto the record in terms of the operationalization by way of comparison. A very important thing. You would note that as a government, we came to the Parliament, we dealt with the Children and Family Division Bill. It is now an Act of Parliament. It has been partially proclaimed. At the same time that we did that, we secured the protocols, the rules, the regulations, the subsidiary legislation to go with it, and we procured the buildings, the staff, and the arrangements. And I'm very pleased to say that we would have taken legislation into the opening of the North Building by July of this year. And that is what I mean in terms of operationalizing the law. And I'm very, very, very grateful for the very strong assistance of all the team members around the table, because this isn't an exercise of one ministry. The Ministry of Works and Transport, the Ministry of National Security, the Office of the Prime Minister, all the Ministry of Finance, because of the data management, the judiciary, in this exciting introduction of operationalization, we have taken the Jamaican phrase. We're flying the plane while we're building it. We're putting it into effect. That phrase came about when I spoke to Jamaica about its major organized crime legislation. And I asked them how they were able to implement that piece of law without tripping over constitutional agreement between opposition and government. And they were shocked, as I've said many times before in this parliament. They were shocked because they said to me, listen, there's some issues which are just so important that we're prepared to fly the plane while we're building it. And they couldn't fathom that we have this form of dynamic in Trinidad and Tobago where things can be tripped, where they can be agreed. And I have to confess that I was rather disappointed in the approach taken in the Senate to this particular piece of law. Senator Mark was vociferous in his failure to support the position on behalf of the bench. I do hope that honorable members, in considering the law now in the House of Representatives, will look to the fact that we have done significant review, line by line, in the Senate work, now before this House. Honorable Member for Tabaquite, having served as a minister with line responsibility in this regard, I'm sure is very passionate about some of these issues and agrees that this may be an appropriate approach to take. But most respectfully, Madam Speaker, this is good law. This is law which will allow us to return the focus of the judiciary to law enforcement, to treating with crimes, to treating with the hard matters. This is law which marries in to the municipal policing which we are bringing alive in and which we have brought alive already in our local government forum, in our municipal corporations. This is law which furthers the creation of the traffic warden system to allow for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to focus on its primary work. And this is law which has an inertia associated with it, which will treat with the matters which I've just spoken to, which is the RF tag IDs, the spot camera system, the method by which we change out the number plates and the motor vehicles in Trinidad and Tobago. It deals with the enforcement of something which is rather exciting and which I can share with you now. The United Kingdom has come up with something called a drugalyzer. We have breathalyzers, but there has been no scientific standard for measuring toxicity in the blood with respect to drugs, be they prescription drugs or other forms of substance. And the United Kingdom experience is informing our fulminations on this. One last matter before I beg to move, Madam Speaker. I'm very, very, very focused on the issue of the disabled in our country. There is an indignity which disabled people suffer in this country in not having an easy approach to their licensing, where they must go through year after year a system which does not make sense, where in every other part of the world, disabled people are able, once certified, to actually drive. And the criminalization and offenses for people who use disabled parking has to be strictly enforced in our country. It is not acceptable that our buildings and that our laws do not treat for the disabled in our society, and that is a matter which has square and sharp focus by the Ministry of Works and Transport and the Attorney General's office, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I look forward to the contribution of honourable members. The government is willing to consider all points of view. We do hope that there can be agreement on the passage of this bill, and I beg to move.
Honourable members, I shall now propose the question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850, to introduce a system of traffic violations for certain breaches of the Act, to provide for the implementation of a red light camera system, a demerit points system, and the reform of the fixed penalty system and related legal proceedings and other related matters be now read a second time. Member for Tabaquite.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before I begin my presentation, I want to take the opportunity to congratulate the staff at the Caroni Office of the Licensing Division. That new facility was a facility that was envisioned and built under the administration of the People's Partnership. And I had cause to go there to transfer a vehicle last week. And I must say that the courtesy and efficiency with which it was done deserves comment, because when you see good things that happen in the public service, you ought to commend it. I would say, however, that it was disgusting when you went to the area where you had to examine the vehicle, that all the old furniture from the Port of Spain office was brought and just dumped there, creating a very unsightly scene at what is a very beautiful building. And I think it's something that the Honourable Minister would want to clean up as fast as possible and not leave it like that. But I want to congratulate Mr. Richards for the good job he has been doing there at that office. And that is in stark contrast to San Fernando, where things remain very badly. And I make this point because in debating this law, one of the things we have to deal with is the improvement and increase in efficiency of the public servants and the servants. And if it is that there is a relationship between higher productivity and working conditions that has manifested itself in a degree of excellence and efficiency at the Caroni station, then one is left to ask the question, is the poor working condition at the San Fernando office the cause of a lot of the frustrations of the officers and the poor performance there? But Madam Speaker, it was very interesting that in testing the system in San Fernando, people are unafraid to come up to you and say, why are you in the line? For $700, you can not have to come in this line. You can get your vehicle inspected and so on. It happened to me in San Fernando a couple of weeks ago. And it's something I think that we have to look into very seriously. Madam Speaker, I don't think that any of us should have great difficulty with the provisions of this law. I don't think so at all. I think that we are aiming for a safer culture as a whole in Trinidad, and the entire traffic arrangements are part of that safer culture, as much as, the crime situation has to be addressed in order to create a safer culture. But I would be the first to agree that there is too much reckless driving on our roads, and too many lives are being lost. And there is a need for a level of penalties which will act as a deterrent to the reckless culture. Madam Speaker, I'm happy to hear the Attorney General speak about driving under the influence and those aspects of the law and so on that, are going to remain. Because despite increasing the fines for driving under the influence of alcohol, we continue to have so many prominent people coming before the courts charged with driving under the influence. And you sometimes wonder whether there is a relationship between the increased fine and actual deterring of people. But I want to urge the Attorney General to note carefully some of the things he said here. He made lots of promises again in his contribution, like the government has been making over the last 20 months. But there's a far cry from what you promise and what you deliver, from the hopes you established to the hopelessness that is now prevalent in the hearts and minds of people. And in his presentation, he spoke about municipal police officers. I recall that in the whole debate under Minister Franklin Khan, when he was Minister of Local Government and when he was pioneering this whole idea of reform of local government, one of the first things he said he was instructed by the Honourable Prime Minister was to increase the number of municipal police officers in the country as a means of improving local policing. This is 20 months going. And I have asked several corporations how many officers have been added to their staff. None. And of the 1,400 promised, none have been added. In fact, they have lost officers who have left and gone over to the police service. So that one wonders whether, in fact, the Attorney General is very serious in terms of his promise to address, to put into place the many things that he has promised in his presentation here today. Then he spoke about the traffic wardens. That is another feature of the last administration, our administration. And I think the traffic warden is a very important institution in the country, very important aspect of our policing and our regulation of the roads and so on. Because it does reduce the number of policemen that you need to put on the roads and let them do more substantive work in terms of crime fighting. I'm very happy that the fine has been increased to 10,000 for the for interfering with the work of a traffic warden. But I must tell you, and it is a fact that traffic wardens have been subjected to a lot of ridicule. You know, they have been scoffed at on the roadways, they have been laughed at, and so on and so forth. But I want to urge the Attorney General to examine the conditions under which traffic wardens are also working in the country. For example, there was a period of about 3 months when no traffic wardens appeared in Gasparilla. And the reason was very simple, that they could not get transport from San Fernando to Gasparilla. And no one in authority at the hierarchy of the traffic warden division was doing anything about it. And I had to make a ministerial intervention with the Honorable Minister in order to get that matter resolved. And even he had difficulty to get it resolved. So it is one thing to have very vibrant things like traffic wardens and what have you. But if you do not have the supporting infrastructure to help them do their work, then you're going to have problems. So traffic wardens, for example, do not have a sub-office in Gasparilla, as in other parts of the country. So they are working and that they have to go into a KFC or they have to go and beg in the police station if they want to use a bathroom of what have you. And that is not right. That is not right. Or a member of parliament office. And that is not right at all for them to do. So that I think that it is very important that we not only promise, but that we also act and do so with a sense of urgency if we are to achieve the efficiencies that we want to achieve. The other point made by the Attorney General had to do with his whole case for what he called the renovation. And I'm getting some a language since I have been here for the last 20 months, architecture, proportionality, renovation, and so on. And it is very interesting, the language of the Attorney General. But while the Attorney General made his case and so on, one of the things he alluded to was the number of complainants who do not go to court, particularly police officers who do not go to court in order to complain, which is a cause for so many cases remaining in the court. But I want to ask a different question, and sometimes it's good to ask the questions. Why are complainants, police complainants, as complainants, not appearing in court? Why are they not appearing in court? And who in the hierarchy of the police service should address these problems? That if a police officer on several occasions does not go to court, who is going to that police officer and asking that police officer, why are you not appearing in this manner? I wanted to link that with something else. Because in the police service, one hopes that promotions are based upon performance and not just seniority or presence. And who is therefore doing the performance appraisals of these officers? And do these performance appraisals mean anything if, in fact, people are being promoted in the police service, but at the same time, they're still not appearing in court and clogging up the system with so many cases? And the description was well and adequately given by the Attorney General. So who is following it up? Who is following it up? And I ask this question because it's a very important question, Madam Speaker, and I beg your permission to say this. I attended a meeting of the Manpower Audit Committee set up by the Honorable Prime Minister to deal with manpower audit in the police service. And this was at the Borough Corporation last Monday evening. And in a question to DCP Harold Phillip, who was present there, he indicated that based on the shift system and so on, only 1,000 police officers, and these are his words, would be available on the roads at any point in time, in the country, sorry, not just on 1,000 police officers will be available on a shift. And that was something that disturbed me very deeply. And I would like to hear from the Honorable Minister of National Security whether that is true, because if that is true, 1,000 police officers on a shift cannot, in my humble view, serve the needs of the population and protect the population as they should. So I think that is something that has to be noted. Now, the Attorney General also raised the question of constitutional matters and said that in the other place, people raise issues of related to the Constitution. Now, I do think that on close examination, there are constitutional issues that arise, particularly in Clause 9 of the bill, because by Clause 9 of the bill, compliance with the Act is a statutory condition for holding of a driver's permit. as well as for the registration of a motor vehicle. And if you look at it very carefully, Madam Speaker, you'll see that the right to hold a driver's license and the right to register your motor vehicle are rights that will qualify under the right to property under Section 4 of the Constitution. And therefore, the effect of these new provisions are that these rights could be limited or cut down for breach of statutory conditions, whether the breaches are for traffic violations as defined by the Act or commission of offenses. And therefore, I have a question that I'd like to ask. Would this mean that a citizen could be deprived of this right to hold a driver's license and to the use and enjoyment of his motor vehicle by the commission of a traffic violation? Because the finding that a traffic violation has been committed under the proposed structure of the Act could be made without resort to the court. And if that is the case, this will mean that the right to hold driver's license and to register a vehicle could be taken away without due process as provided under Section 4 of the Constitution. And that is just one area, I believe, that might gain the attention of the Honorable Attorney General in terms of whether, in fact, the Section 4 or Section 5 and so on of the Constitution, whether you need a special majority, as we often say in this particular case. Madam Speaker, when I began my presentation, I spoke about the fact that we want to create a safety culture, a culture of safety. And that should be really a prime objective of this legislation, as well as other legislation in criminal matters. Madam Speaker, the one thing I want to warn against is that in this particular case where we are introducing all these new fines and heavy fines in some cases, like the $10,000, like the $7,000 for red light violations and so on, I want to forewarn that I hope that the real objective is not just revenue collection or the increase in revenue collection, but that we are seriously interested in preventative behaviors that are inimical to societal well-being and to the lives of others. And I don't speak off the top of my head, Madam Speaker. You know, a couple of years ago, a 9-year-old nephew of mine, along with about 6 others, were killed in a road accident on Mosquito Creek by a truck driven by a 70-year-old individual. And up to today, if you drive along Mosquito Creek, you will see that the families of those people continue to place something there to remind about that. 9 years old, life snuffed out and gone. So that, you know, we have all, in one way or the other, felt what has happened, what happens when people drive as they do on the roads. You know, Madam Speaker, it is not nice to speak about, but policemen on motorbikes are guiding heavy vehicles with heavy equipment on the road. And if you are in the Southland, like I am every day traveling from Chaguanas to Faizabad through the Ring Road or onto Point 14 as I have to go, Madam Speaker, the driving speed limit is 40 kilometers an hour for those vehicles. Madam Speaker, I can tell you that they don't drive 40. The policemen are driving their motorbikes at a far faster rate than 40, and the vehicles are moving at a far. And sometimes you have to go onto the edge of the road to get away from these vehicles, Madam Speaker, and they have no respect for you. Madam Speaker, there are other things happening on the road that we are not noticing. There are vehicles, heavy vehicles, with multitude of lights in the night, multitude of lights, contractors' vehicles. And when these vehicles come at you in the night and you're coming from the other side, they dazzle you. And I don't know if you guys have experienced this. They dazzle you, and it's something terrible. And why is the police, why are the policemen and women who are on the roads not doing anything about this kind of what is, in my view, an abuse? Madam Speaker, so there might be ample reason for heavy fines as proposed in this legislation. I mean, let's face it, too many of us in this country are just bold-facedly breaking the law. In other words, it seems to be part of our culture. Break the law and see if you get away with it, and see if they can catch you. There's something also that is not nice in this country, the challenge to authority. The challenge to authority. Whether it's happening in the schools, happening, in organizations, but this is a negative feature of our society, the challenge to authority. There might be good reason to challenge authority, and one should, in fact, use the law to challenge authority. There's nothing wrong in that. If one thinks one is right about something. But, I think there's a flagrant misuse of this, the way people challenge authority. Madam Speaker, one of my concerns has to do with the $7,000 fine for breaking a red light. A red light. Now, the AG did refer to the statistics for red light breaking, and I did do some research, and for the month of May 2017, from the 1st of May to 31st May 2017, the Traffic Management Division indicated to me right here at Hyatt, you're not going to believe this, Madam Speaker, there were 4,864 red light offenses. 4,864, 157 per day. And if you take 4,000, well, let's say 5,000, and you multiply that by $7,000, you get what? $3.5 million? Am I right? $3.5 million? That's one light in 1 month. And if you multiply, am I right, with that member?
But go on.
Yeah. Plenty money, right? If you multiply it, how much is it? You see, we don't have mathematicians. We need Dr. Capilio back in the house. But nevertheless, the point I'm making, it is $7,000, for one offense. 7,000 by 5,000 will give you $35 million. No, $3.5 million. $3.5 million by 12 is $42 million. One light. One light. Now, if you have 10 lights like that in the country, in 1 year, your revenue is going to go up by half a billion dollars. And that's the point, Prime Minister. We have seen in the case of DUI, it hasn't stopped them, It hasn't stopped them. Right? People are still speeding. People are still drag racing in places they shouldn't drag race and what have you. People are still parking on yellow signs. That's one of the things I wanted to see in this law, where there are no parking signs. I didn't see real offenses, but the police, the traffic management department put yellow lines on a corner so that people can, see incoming and outgoing vehicles, and people are still breaking that. I have written to Superintendent Kenny McIntyre in Chaguanas on 2 occasions, and I've spoken to him on 3 occasions, and I have a history of the calls I made to him. And up to this day, they have not even given tickets or brought the wrecker to remove vehicles on Barry Crescent and Ramsaran Street, as well as Market Street and others, where people are openly violating and ignoring the yellow lines on the road. There are people who are selling there on the roads, breaking the law by having vending within a radius of 1 mile from the market, which they shouldn't, and not one thing is being done. And I direct this to my colleague, member for Toko Sanigrani, who might want to speak to the superintendent, ask why is nothing being done in order to enforce the traffic laws in Chaguanas in that way, and let decent citizens benefit from observing the law rather than having to cope with what is happening there, people breaking the law to their disinterest. So you have 5,000 violations at one traffic light. And that's why I raise the problem. Is this a revenue-raising mechanism, or is it really meant to deal with errant behavior on the roads? And I have statistics. For 2015, the number of red light infractions here at Hyatt was 41,634. 2014 was 39,898. So it is really an average of about 5,000 or 4,500 per month at one traffic light. One traffic light. Now, this raises an issue. We have a high crime situation in the country, a very high crime situation. And Madam Speaker, if you drive in the night, like some of us must drive late into the night, and you reach a traffic light in a dangerous area, and I want to give you some dangerous areas. West Moorings by West Mall. What's that mall called? on Westmore. Is Westmore? Westmore. Debe traffic light by Namdevco. That's two. A third traffic light would be in the vicinity of where the technical school is in San Fernando, St. Joseph Village, and Val Park. Madam Speaker, all of those are critical areas where in the nighttime you could be robbed, as people have been robbed right there near the Brahma Kumari building traffic light that swings into Chaguanas. People are. So what happens with a person who is fearful, have their glass wound up, fearful of standing by that traffic light, waiting for it to change, and in the middle of the night there's nobody else and could be robbed. And this is a real case. So I'm wondering whether after certain hours in these high-risk areas, whether the lights cannot be adjusted to go and blink, so that people don't have to stand by the lights and can move into and move on. Why can't that be done at high-risk intersections? Because I have just listed for you some high-risk intersections, and the reason I listed these for you is because I have intimate knowledge of people who have been robbed at those particular sections. The glass have been smashed and what have you. So, for example, in light of the heavy fines for breaking a traffic light, I would like to propose that we begin to try to condition people's behavior. We look at what's happened at Hyatt, and why can't we now, even now, on an experimental basis, start sending out the tickets to people? Sending out, so that they can receive these tickets in their hand and know, hey, hold on, this happens again, I will have to pay. Rather than just bring the law onto them immediately. It's important to bring the law on. But I'm saying while we are doing this, it's going to take some time after we debate this act to get this into motion. But in the meantime, I see nothing preventing us from getting the tickets and the citations into the hands of people so they know, hey, hold on, you are breaking the law and there's going to be a penalty for this errant conduct. And sometimes you have to begin to condition behavior of people in that regard. Madam Speaker, as we speak about that, I support this bill because there's an economic cost to accidents and to the loss of lives. A real economic cost. Madam Speaker, in the period between 2005 and 2015, 2,040 adults lost their lives on the roads of Trinidad. And of those, 130 were minors, 812 were drivers, 608 were passengers, 610 pedestrians, 89 motorcyclists, and 51 were cyclists. Now, just last week you saw a pedestrian again ignoring the walkover and losing his life in the area near the university somewhere. I mean, we extend my condolences to the family. But every day in the Charlieville area you see people running across the road and ignoring the overpasses, the walkovers that have been placed there. And maybe we should have also had a fine in these, amongst these, for people who don't use the walkovers and risk their own lives running across the street. Jaywalking. I think the fine for jaywalking is $10. $10. But I'm very serious, Madam Speaker, in addressing this matter, that this is something that should be considered. People, ignoring that. Madam Speaker, look at the economic costs of loss of life. I have here several articles dating back to 2015. This is a teacher killed in crash. Teacher killed in crash. School teacher Everett Batiste killed along a crash in Mosquito Creek. Just 28 years old, physics teacher at San Fernando Central Secondary School. You know how much it must have taken? The cost of educating this person by the society. And this cost, you will hope to have a social benefit to the country, but that is lost. How do you value that economic loss? You can, and go, regiment officer killed in road accident. You know, what does it take to train and develop a regiment officer, and he dies? Cop killed in crash. He was a passenger in a vehicle. Police officer near Claxton Bay killed. And his colleague critically injured. This one is a very interesting one. Under the Chaguanas flyover, Mark Daly, a devoted family man, son, brother, and and so on. A father, a godfather, what have you. And daily served as an ambassador to the sport of volleyball. He proudly captained both the Trinidad and Tobago national junior and senior men's team for over 10 years and was a recipient of the Whitco Volleyball Sportsman of the Year. And I make this point for a reason, that there's a heavy cost. When you lose somebody like this, Madam Speaker, it's a big loss. In a country in which you need role models like these, and you need volunteers like this gentleman to go among the youth population and to inspire them away from a life of crime into useful activities. So I'm saying that there's a social and economic cost that perhaps we can't even calculate in terms of the loss of lives in this regard. Army recruit, and then dies again. And then there's another one here, 23rd of April 2007, Air Guard officer killed in crash. Sergeant Christian Guevara, also killed in crash. Baby orphan, as parents die in crash on the Churchill Roosevelt Highway. Another kind of problem. Child would not grow up with parents. And that's a deep thing. Do you know what, Madam Speaker? Arrive Alive gave a very interesting statistic. And they gave this statistic on the 13th of June, 2007. No, they gave this statistic on the day, the UN World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims. And it is said in this article, which came in the Guardian newspaper, that 83% of all fatal crashes in our country are young men under the age of 35 years. 83%. Under the age of 35 years. That is a serious matter. 83 years. 83% under the age of 35. So there seems to be a relationship between, if you take youth as defining age of 35, between youth drivers and the number of road fatalities. And there's the very sad one, in my view, of Khadija and Kertima Waddell, two sisters, who were also killed, 18 years old, just about that, and they were killed. They attended St. Joseph Convent in San Fernando. And, so this is very important to me, this whole bill and these fines. And then there's a case of Jonathan Inglefield, who died just 25 years old on the 11th of February 2009. He died when another car ran the red light at Westmoreland's intersection, traveling in an easterly direction. Jonathan had on his seatbelt. His mom, Miss Sharon Inglefield, has now dedicated her life to this purpose. And today we must pay tribute to her. Tribute to her for picking this up. See, Madam Speaker, a car is a weapon. Just like a gun or a knife, a car is a weapon. And people who drive cars must not take life for granted. People must learn to drive defensively in this country. And it seems to me that that's something that we are missing. So there's, yes? Sure.
For giving way. Just wanted to point out in the Senate, we introduced an amendment to criminalize using a car as a weapon, and for terrorism as well.
Thank you. So that a car is a weapon. But, Madam Speaker, that is one side of the issue. Madam Speaker, there's another point I want to make that I think is important. Alcohol is a serious cause of accidents in this country. Let's face it, Madam Speaker. Serious cause. And I'm not going to moralize and tell people what to drink or what not to drink, or who to drink or who not to drink. But, Madam Speaker, I did some research over the last couple of days to find out how much people drink in Trinidad. And there's something that we have to be concerned about. I tried to get the production of rum in Trinidad. I couldn't get it. I tried to get the production of beer in Trinidad. I couldn't get it. When I called the Ministry of Trade and Industry, they referred me to the TTMA. The TTMA told me they are not sure, it'll take a few days to get it. So my statistics only have to do with imported liquor.
Honourable Member for Tabaquite, your original 30 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 15 more minutes if you wish to avail yourself.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, the last figures I had in 2014 indicated that there were about 800,000 cases of beer a month, I believe it was, in Trinidad.
Imported?
No, produced. Produced. Yeah, they export some. But I just want to deal with the import of liquor. And my figures come from the Central Statistical Office, right? And it's dated right up to March 2017. But I'll just go for 2016 and 2015, because it appears to me that between 2015 and 16, there has been a drop in the consumption of imported liquor in the country. Whereas in 2015, 29,047,719 liters of imported liquor, all imported liquor, were consumed. In 2016, that was down to 23,527,813.
They have no money.
13. So it was down. But that included, the figure in 2016 and 15, but 16 included 7,672,000 liters of what is called denatured spirits ethyl alcohol, which is imported to make rum and so on. So if we take off that, let's just say we take that out of it, from the 23 million, you have still 16 million liters of alcohol, 16 million liters of imported alcohol being consumed. If you take 16 million liters and convert it into 750 ml bottles, you have 21 million bottles of imported liquor being consumed in Trinidad last year. 21 million bottles, 750 ml. Now, Madam Speaker, why I make that point is this. 66.8% of your population is between the age of 20 and 70. 67%. So 917,000 persons are in that group. And I want to call that the social drinking group, if you want. Now, I don't know how much of those drink, but if you cut it by half, and you say 450,000 persons, if you go 500,000 persons, and you divide 21 million bottles of liquor by 500,000 persons, you're getting about 40 bottles of liquor per capita as an average. This has to be a high alcoholic content-driven society. And that is something that also speaks in the relationship to that 83% of the accidents occurring with people 35 years and younger. What are we doing about that? And so, you know, the law is important, and the fines are important. But how are we going to change the behaviors that get people to behave in a responsible manner even before the accidents take place on the roads of Trinidad? So I think that it's important to note. Now, remember, in my figures, that 40 bottles doesn't include rum, because rum is being produced locally. This is only imported liquor into the country. It's stunning. It's stunning, Madam Speaker. But, Madam Speaker, one of the big issues is, why are people tempted to break traffic laws? That's an issue. Why are people tempted to break traffic laws? Why do people break traffic laws? Why are people driving on the shoulder of the road every morning coming into Port of Spain? Why are they doing that? Why is it? It is because people are frustrated at the traffic situation as a whole. They're frustrated. And something has to be done. Madam Speaker, it is not easy to stand up or sit in your car for 2 to 3 hours, average 1.5 hours to get into Port of Spain on a morning. My daughter comes to work, Port of Spain, every morning. She leaves home at 5:30, otherwise she cannot reach to her workplace for 8 o'clock. 5:30, that child is leaving the house every morning to get to work for 8 o'clock. People in South Trinidad leave 4:30 in the morning in order to get into Port of Spain. Madam Speaker, it raises the question again as to how long we are going to take to get an efficient public transport system in the country. How long are we going to take to implement what I had attempted to implement when I was Minister of Works, which was to use the shoulder of the road between specific hours for buses and maxi taxis to come into Port of Spain and allow that movement of that traffic into Port of Spain as fast as possible. Because if you see, change is resisted, but change has to be bold at times. And sometimes you have to be bold. And I am saying that we have to be bold in some of the experiments that we need to put in place in order to reduce this frustration. Because out of frustration, people do a lot of things on the road. Road rage is an outcome also of frustration in the traffic. And in this regard, one has to urge the government again to decentralize services of government. Decentralize them. You know, you don't need and you should not have to come into Port of Spain for everything. You should not have to do that. As I said, the carrying licensing facilities is fine, but let's build other facilities across the country in the same way. Let's do that. We were talking about hospital services, and we have the Children's Hospital, the Point Fortin Hospital, the Arima Hospital, all excellent projects started by the former administration. I hope that these are completed, because this will help decentralize also the availability of services. Madam Speaker, another point I want to make is this matter of defective vehicles on the road. We have a law in Trinidad where a vehicle which is 5 years or older has to be inspected at an authorized vehicle inspection place in the country. Madam Speaker, it will be a great exercise to take the Chaguanas Main Road and see how many 5-year-old vehicles have already been inspected and have the proper sticker. And how many vehicles are defective, and therefore, being defective, they are a threat to the safety and security of people on the roads. Now, how many of these vehicle inspection places are operating as they should operate? And what are the authorities doing in order to go and institute a quality control system to see whether these persons who have the authority to do what they are doing are following the rules and they are doing it correctly, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, I went to inspect a vehicle at the South office, and they say, go over the pit. And I go over the pit, and what they say, drive, mash your brakes, and pull up your handbrakes. And my vehicle was inspected. My vehicle was inspected. That is what is inspection about. Come on, something is wrong with how we are proceeding about people's lives. People said, you know, wash the vehicle good, make sure you underwash it and so on, and you will pass through the system very quickly. Is that how we have taught people to beat the system at the expense of the lives of people in this country? I think these are issues. Madam Speaker, I want to also raise the question of driving instructors. What are the charges for licensing offices who collude with driving instructors and driving schools to pass driving tests? Madam Speaker, I showed to the Honourable Minister something that was happening in San Fernando. And it is well known that there are licensing officers in this country who are in collusion with driving schools, and they are passing people. Corrupt. They're corrupt. Madam Speaker, they're corrupt. Madam Speaker, people in Chaguanas are told, go Point Fortin and pay $1,500 if you want your license, you'll get it faster. That's happening. How are we going to deal with that? What is the law prescribing? What is law prescribing? Why are people tempted to do all of this? Madam Speaker, the corruption in the system is also due to bureaucratic blocks that make people frustrated, and they say, look, let me just pay and get this thing done with. Just pay and get this thing. Inefficient processes and low productivity. How long we are going to put up with this, Madam Speaker? How long we are going to put up with this? The performance management systems are weak. And Madam Speaker and Attorney General, we can have all the laws and we can have everything, but if you do not have a performance management system, you are not going to improve anything. Performance appraisal is after the fact, Madam Speaker. The role of senior police officers in this country is really how to manage performance. And that's very different. And in managing performance, you have to set clear goals, measurable goals for people. As the Prime Minister has indicated, he is now going to do it as ministers and MPs, set clear goals for them. I remember as a Minister of Government, I had to report every month on the goals I had set for the year and the previous month and track them to the Prime Minister. Yeah? And therefore, so there's a difference. And I urge for performance management rather than performance appraisal. The other matter I want to make, which I think Mr. AG is alluded to in this bill, is the fines for vehicles with loud music systems and the playing of this in residential areas in particular. I mean, you still see maxi taxis with all these big music systems, and they are blasting them. You know about the video systems in maxi taxis, in which children see what they are not supposed to see. Madam Speaker, in this regard, while it is that the law here may have provisions, the question has to be asked in relation to the law, what is the EMA doing with respect to noise pollution in vehicles? What is the EMA doing also with these black smoke that keep coming out of diesel vehicles in particular on the roads? When last have we seen EMA officers on the road testing vehicles? Madam Speaker, what I am alluding to here, and I hate to say it, is that there seems to be some kind of institutional collapse in this country of institutions that are designed to deal with the real problems of people. Institutions are collapsing all around us because somehow there's an absence of inspirational leadership to guide this country and to guide these institutions. The politicians aside, but there are managers in the system also who need to lead and manage. And it seems to me people have dropped their hands in this country. And what we are suffering from is something called malage and malaise. And something has to be done very quickly. Because as a result of this failure to produce and to act and to do our jobs, Madam Speaker, what is happening is the hopelessness is increasing in the country. That is a dangerous thing for us. Very dangerous. Madam Speaker, I am on the ground. And I know, and I feel, and I hear, and I sense it. Madam Speaker, I don't want to say any more on that. But take drag racing, for example. People are still drag racing. The People's Partnership Administration, when I was there, Mr. Frankie Boudram and Mr. Robert Amar came to me and asked that we repave the drag circuit, racing circuit at Wallerfield. And for the first time in 30-something years, they told me it was repaved. So you have a facility that can be used. You have a facility. Why are you not penalizing people even more for not using the facility that has been provided by the state to drag race? But you come and you're interfering with the safety of people. Madam Speaker, as I come to a close of my presentation, I want to also suggest that a defensive driving course should be a prerequisite for a driving permit in this country. And I want to suggest that driving instructors we should always test driving instructors to really see whether they are capable of teaching people to drive, or whether they are courant with really what are some of the things that people should know.
In Canada, they do it in schools.
And I say this, Madam Speaker, because again, I refer to the propensity of accidents among youths. You know, how many people, you get a driving permit, but can you drive? Can you really drive? So, Madam Speaker, the one thing I didn't touch in relation to this, and I think is important, is the cable barriers along the highway. Madam Speaker, I have statistics about the cable barriers and how many hits there are and so on along the cable barriers. And that's well known. But the point I want to make about the cable barriers is this. The cars are hitting away the cable barriers, and by the way, it's very costly to fix those cable barriers. Very, very costly. And I want to suggest that insurance companies should be made to pay the cost of those cable barriers. Insurance companies, because they pay to repair vehicles, but now they are damaging property of the state. And why can't insurance companies be made to pay? Why? It doesn't matter to me who. I stand as a parliamentarian on the side of what is right. It technically can't be done. Well, you know, it doesn't prevent me from raising it. But there are many things can be done. Can be done. Well, I'm happy to hear technically it can be done, because I think it's important. But the cable barriers, in 2012, you saw the number of hits on cable barriers per month. In 2014, the average hits in 2014 were about 15 per month on the cable barriers. 15 per month. It cost a lot of money to fix it. In fact, Madam Speaker, because of those cable barriers, we have saved lives. We have saved lives. I've seen cement trucks get hooked onto those cable barriers. Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Member for Princestown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the bill before us today is an act to amend the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act 4850 to introduce a system of traffic violations for certain breaches of the Act, to provide for the implementation of a red light camera system, a demerit point system, and a reform of the fixed penalty system, and related legal proceedings and other matters. Madam Speaker, quite a mouthful. Madam Speaker, some of the issues that the Honorable Attorney General raised when he piloted this bill in the House, he indicated that he was taking a common sense approach in the reform of our laws. And throughout my contribution, I would like to speak to some of those reforms that the Honorable AG has taken a common sense approach to. The Honorable Attorney General has been speaking in several quarters about a suite of legislation with respect to different things, one of which being a crime-fighting initiative. But, Madam Speaker, today we are looking at decriminalizing certain offenses and turning them into violations. We heard from the Attorney General that with respect to the demerit point system, that he had the opportunity to visit Jamaica and look at Jamaica's legislation, and also their software to see how it operated, how it functioned, and also some of the successes that that was met with. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, there are other areas with respect to the Jamaican legislation that the Honorable Attorney General spoke of that he did not address, and that will form part of my contribution as well. Madam Speaker, in determining how we proceed with this bill, we must ask ourselves, what is the motive of the government? What are their objectives? What do they hope to achieve from this bill? Madam Speaker, a bill like this must not be a temporary bandage or an ailment that requires really an overhaul, surgical procedure. We must be dealing with the causes and not only the symptoms. And again, the member for Tabaquite spoke about some of those causes. The Honorable Attorney General went into a few of them. But Madam Speaker, this bill really requires us to drill deeper into some of the issues that it seeks to address. Madam Speaker, the Honorable Attorney General identified to members of the other place that the government had determined that there are several areas in which this bill could assist. The AG stated that making some prior traffic offenses now violations would relieve the overburdened and overcrowded magistracy courts. And again, the Honorable Attorney General took us through the judicial statistics with respect to how many magistrates, how many deals with criminal matters, and so forth. And again, Madam Speaker, that is one of the areas that I too would like to focus on, because I believe that if not a total overhaul of our licensing authority here in Trinidad and Tobago, the objective identified by the Honorable Attorney General, member for San Fernando West, might do quite the opposite of what he's looking at in terms of relieving the burdens of the magistracy court and the administration of justice in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I turn to a Guardian article dated May 3, 2017, written by Gail Alexander, and it stated, move over property tax. Government's next big revenue earner might be coming from traffic fines under upcoming motor vehicle legislation. And under that law, it could break the red light in future. You may be helping the state earn money. Attorney General Faris Al-Rawi piloted the legislation in the Senate yesterday to introduce a new system of traffic violations. He noted that revenue earned from traffic matters over 2010 to 2016 totaled $250 million. And that was when only 36% of people compiled between 2010 to 2016 had paid their tickets. Madam Speaker, the AG in that article indicated that the judiciary's annual reports between 2011 to 2015 showed that there were 120,000 traffic cases done over that period, netting roughly about $171 million in revenue for the state. But again, he noted the compliance rate among those who paid tickets was only 36%. Madam Speaker, the member for Tabaquite, and even the Honorable Attorney General, when he piloted, he spoke about renovating the systems, looking at the architecture and looking at how, if we renovate these systems, that we can generate further revenue, if the systems are implemented and if the systems are addressed in such a way that we can actually hold persons accountable for the fines that they would have incurred. Madam Speaker, in that article, the AG said the legislation seeks to introduce a system of traffic violations for certain breaches of the law. It decriminalizes road traffic offenses by converting them into violations. However, serious offenses, blood alcohol, and again, the member for Tabaquite spoke about it, blood alcohol levels, reckless driving, causing death won't be decriminalized. You know, Madam Speaker, when I became a member of Parliament in September of 2015 to roughly around Carnival of this year, in total I've been stopped 6 times and administered a breathalyzer. And in complying for these 6 breathalyzers, I'm very proud and happy to say that on every occasion, the reading was 0. But Madam Speaker, some people are not as fortunate because of their choice in conduct. And again, it is one of the areas that I will deal with a little bit later on, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the legislation particularly provides for the implementation of a red light camera at traffic lights. If motorists break the red light, the camera will snap a photograph of their vehicle's number plate. And again, the Honorable Attorney General told us that he is going to be introducing an additional legislation come September that will deal with license plates in this country. Madam Speaker, a report will then be sent via mail to the vehicle's owners, along with a notice of the breach of the law, the photo and details of the legal process to deal with the matter. The legislation also introduces a demerit point system and fixed penalty system. It also provides for vehicle's owner and user of the vehicle holding a driver's license to be liable for any breach committed via the vehicle. Al-Rawi noted the judiciary's recurring call for a large number of traffic matters in courts to be handled in a way that would monopolize magistrates' time. Over August 2010 and July 2016, there were over 67,926 cases concerning outstanding traffic matters, he added. Madam Speaker, we have a situation where people believe the criminal justice system won't move as it is overburdened. And that is something that the Honorable Attorney General has said time and time again. But Madam Speaker, let us take the first point of that article that deals with the traffic offenses before the magistrate's court. When we look, the annual reports, as the AG indicated, stated that the figure is quite high and this could be a beneficial interest to the legal justice system. Now, Madam Speaker, I will show later on in my presentation, as I said, that this could actually be quite the reverse if we do not look at the overall picture. Madam Speaker, this country has developed a reluctance and has lost confidence and trust in some of the institutions, as mentioned by the member for Tabaquite. Madam Speaker, if we do not make a complete overhaul of the licensing office here in Trinidad and Tobago, and I look forward to the additional pieces of legislation brought by the member for San Fernando West, because, Madam Speaker, there's a general feeling in this country, and I understand what the argument of the Honorable Attorney General was. And he said, well, we will look at making these offenses into violations, and then we'll seek to impose the penalties and so on. And as we continue along, we will keep adding. But, Madam Speaker, if we don't look at an authority like the licensing office in Trinidad and Tobago in its totality, really, in effect, we would be doing more harm than good, in my estimation. Madam Speaker, the third point that appears to be on everyone's mind with respect to these amendments to our Motor Vehicle and Traffic Act had to do with the stiff penalties associated with the violations. Again, Madam Speaker, I first stated that the government's motives must be a genuine one. They must attempt to create a new system that will affect the commuting public and their lives in a positive way. Many in the country, Madam Speaker, fear that the bill before us is really a money-making scheme. Madam Speaker, those are not my words, but I've seen from many commentators commenting on this particular bill coming before that they do not have trust and confidence that this is really looking at changing the culture, as the Honorable Attorney General said, in terms of how we look at the traffic offenses and traffic violations. Madam Speaker, the government has to address some issues that are shaded in grey with respect to this bill in order to gain the public trust and confidence. It cannot be seen as surreptitious in nature and gives no redress to the motoring public of our country. Madam Speaker, in the Senate, several amendments were made, several proposals were also advanced and were not accepted. But these are what are the essential points that essentially came out of the bill before it came to the House. First, Madam Speaker, obstructing a traffic warden on duty or failing to comply with his or her directions can attract a fine of $10,000 and or 6 months in prison, raised from $300. There is no limit to motorists. 2, the introduction of the red light traffic camera system. Persons captured breaching the red light traffic camera system will be fined $7,000, which is a new fine. The red light traffic camera means an electronic device for the purpose of capturing and producing photographic images and video recordings of traffic violations. 3, unlawful interference with a red light traffic camera will now carry a fine of $10,000. 4, violating the speed limit has a maximum fine of $3,000 and varies based on how far the speed limit a motorist travels. It is a fixed penalty fine, and motorists can accumulate a maximum of 6 demerit points. 5, driving without a seatbelt has a fixed penalty of $1,000 and 4 demerit points. However, should the ticket be contested, Madam Speaker, drivers face a maximum of $4,000 for their first offense and a maximum of $8,000 thereafter. 6, the driver will also be made liable for driving with a person in the front seat who is not wearing a seatbelt and faces a fixed penalty. This also carries 4 demerit points. 7, drag racing on highways without the consent of the Commissioner of Police carries a fine of $6,000. Again, something that the member for Tabaquite raised and something that we support, up from $2,000, and the prison term was removed. This carries 14 demerits. And honestly, Madam Speaker, I would like for the Honorable Attorney General to indicate to us why was the issue with respect to the prison term removed with this particular piece clause that was dealt with in the bill. Madam Speaker, 8, driving at a child under the age of 5 without a car seat carries a fixed penalty of $1,000. However, if contested, motorists can be fined a maximum of $4,000. It also carries 4 demerit points. Reformed fixed penalty system, Madam Speaker. Now, this is to target persons who are issued tickets and fail to pay them. The new system will address this. If a person wishes to contest a ticket, he or she must file a notice, as the Honorable Attorney General has indicated, to the court, indicating that the intention to contest within 14 days of the ticket being issued. If this is not done and the ticket is not paid within 30 days, the motorist will be required to pay the ticket value plus, Madam Speaker, a quarter of the ticket value. So you're paying the ticket fine and also a quarter. But it does not go down to address whether or not, if you put yourself before the court in terms of making an application, it doesn't address the circumstances under which you can seek redress with respect to the fines incurred here. Madam Speaker, for example, if the fixed penalty is $1,000, motorists will be required to pay $1,250. Failure to pay this within the first 14 days after due, 30 days has passed, would result in the cost increasing up to an addition of half the ticket cost. Based on the example above, the cost would now be $1,500. Now, Madam Speaker, that is just an example. If this is not paid, then the licensing officer would write the motorist informing of the unpaid ticket. After a period of time, the motorist license would be cancelled until the ticket is paid. The motorist would also not be able to complete any transaction with the use of his or her driver's permit or the vehicle until said ticket is paid. Only if a person decides to contest the ticket would they face the maximum fines outlined. Madam Speaker, in some ways, some persons have indicated that they believe that this structure is really an unfair one, especially considering the economic climate that we are in. While I understand the merits with respect to some of these fines, I think, Madam Speaker, when you see later down, when you look at benchmarks, international benchmarks, in other countries that share a similar jurisprudence to ours, that shares this entire piece of law, and has advanced it in their own countries, you will see that there's a huge disparity in terms of the fee structure. Madam Speaker, the licensing authority shall, with respect to the demerit point system, for the purpose of administering demerit points, establish and maintain a register to be known as a demerit point register. If a motorist is convicted for an offense or traffic violation, it will be recorded by the licensing authority in the demerit point register system. Over a 3-year period, Madam Speaker, if a motorist accumulates 10 to 14 demerit points, he or she can be suspended for 6 months. And again, Madam Speaker, I believe that there are some of these issues that need to be further fleshed out with respect to the cancellation and or suspension of license with respect to persons accumulating the demerit points. And the Honorable Attorney General pointed us, and he said, if you look at the schedule, that you will be able to see some of the offenses that will now become violations. But Madam Speaker, that in itself, when you look at it, it has shortcomings, and there are loopholes, and there are offenses that have not been mentioned, that have not been turned into violations, which this bill does not address, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, while I believe in the principles contained in some of the amendments, I also believe that there are shortcomings and loopholes that, as I have indicated. The issues, and the Honorable Prime Minister prompted the member for Tabaquite to use the word corruption. Corruption in the sense of the system again. The system that we have inherited for over the past few decades that really is in need of rooting out the levels of corruption that it has in order for us to advance a piece of legislation like this and for others to come, as the AG again has indicated in September. For years, Madam Speaker, we have been hearing about duplicate license plates. We've been hearing about duplicate license numbers, corrupt officers accepting bribes to pass driving tests, duplicate license plates, as I've indicated, long lines and delays at license offices, no stickers available for inspected vehicles, allegations of overzealous officers with respect to issuing tickets. Madam Speaker, in the public domain, and this is not me saying this, but I read an article recently in the Trinidad Express, and the comments that were suggested under that article, if you check online, spoke about mandated quotas for the issue of traffic violations. And again, Madam Speaker, I believe that it is the onus of the members of the government to indicate whether or not these allegations that are being put in the public domain of this really being a money-making scheme, some have likened it to a Ponzi scheme, to whether or not these are actual realities where they have identified certain lights and they are going to put into effect through those who will be effected in legislation actual quotas. Madam Speaker, you have all this going on in a system that the people of our country has lost faith in. This bill does not address many of those woes at the licensing office. Madam Speaker, let us look at the demerit system. And first of all, and I sincerely hope that this would not be a repeat of the property tax fiasco, and that the government will embark on an education program to properly sensitize the population on how the demerit system will work. Madam Speaker, again, you cannot bring legislation, drop it in the public domain, leave more questions than answers, not explain to the public, especially the motoring public, how this will affect. And I would hope that when the Honorable Attorney General or any member who speaks from the government side will be able to give us the statistical data with respect to not only how many young persons between the ages of 18 to 35 are holders of driver's license, but also give us a breakdown of some of the other age groups. Again, Madam Speaker, this will have serious implication on the education program that must be provided to our citizens to explain how the red light traffic camera system will work, whether or not this is going to be implemented across the board in terms of throughout the country, or whether or not we are going to continue seeing just pilot projects, and no real effective measures by putting these cameras across the country, but also at the same time, the demerit point system. You know, Madam Speaker, from my own personal experience, a few years ago, I was involved in a very serious accident. And the driver was charged with drunk driving. The driver that hit me was charged with drunk driving. But when we got to the police station, there were no breathalyzers to be administered in the police station. And thankfully, one of the officers insisted from another station who had stopped to see what was happening, indicated that they needed to go to another police station to have the breathalyzer administered. Madam Speaker, the person who was involved in the accident, who was driving on the other side of the wrong side of the road with a head-on collision, was charged with being over a legal limit 3 times. Over the legal limit 3 times. Madam Speaker, when that case went to the High Court, and the judgment, again, I would not go into the details of it because it is before the courts, but Madam Speaker, do you know that in the police reports there was no mention, absolute no mention, that the driver had surpassed the legal limit over 3 times. And Madam Speaker, these are some of the loopholes that I hope that will be addressed in terms of sensitizing our population in terms of what is their rights, but also what some of the demerit point system, the red light camera system, will affect in terms of turning offenses into violations. Madam Speaker, the penalty point or demerit point system is one in which a driver's licensing authority, police force, or other organizations issues cumulative demerits or points to drivers on conviction of road traffic offenses or violations. Points may either be added or subtracted depending on the particular system in use. Usually both addition and subtraction are used in many countries. And I looked at the Honorable Attorney General's Hansard from the Senate when he piloted and even when in his wrapping up. And again, Madam Speaker, he dealt with the issue of addition of these demerit points, but gave very little information in terms of the subtraction of these points. And I'm hoping that someone from the government side would have looked at the bill in its entirety, would have had consultations with the member for San Fernando West and others who would have been instrumental into this bill to guide us through whether or not this bill deals with subtractions and how. Madam Speaker, I am hopeful that the Honorable Attorney General will clarify at some point on the area of the demerit system when it comes to subtracting the accumulated points. I'm aware that in part of the bill, it says that a defensive driving course, and the member for Tabaquite indicated that it was his desire to see that a defensive driving course be made mandatory for 18 to 25 age group for first-time license holders. But Madam Speaker, I am aware that while the bill says that the defensive driving course can negate accumulated points, I have no faith in that. Because again, when we are doing, what we are doing, Madam Speaker, is entrusting a system that has serious clouds hanging over it of suspicion and corruption, who is now going to be entrusted with the job of determining who gets back their license, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, you have heard from both sides of the House in the crosstalk. Persons were talking about point 14 and Shigonas. It's across the board in this country. And you are putting that same power in the hands of those who have allegations of corruption against them. Madam Speaker, and that is why I say if you do not look at a total overhaul of the system and you seek just to bring piecemeal legislation, it will not have the desired effect that you want it to have. And that is why I say you will end up having more problems in the magistracy court in Trinidad and Tobago if some of these fundamental issues are not addressed. You know, Madam Speaker, in bakeries they say when you have hot hops, it goes right off the shelf. Madam Speaker, you also hear about who can pay the highest bidder. And Madam Speaker, with the culture and the attempt to change the cultures indicated by the member for San Fernando West, we must also put the system in place to change that culture. And again, you cannot come to us and you're essentially putting the cart before the horse, saying, yes, 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 all of this will work. Grandiose ideas, which we believe that there is merit in some of these ideas that will bear some fruit. But Madam Speaker, if we continue to put the cart before the horse and do not change the system, we will not see the desired outcomes. Madam Speaker, the points that are accumulated are typically applied after driving offenses are committed. And they are cancelled sometimes after a few years afterwards or after other conditions are met. And again, this is another loophole that exists, because what we should have heard from the Honorable Attorney General today, that in this law, these are the conditions that should be met with respect to the subtraction. And again, this is a fundamental loophole. As I've indicated, I have not seen from the Hansard and from the Honorable Attorney General's explanations how we are going to deal with the issues of the conditions that should be met with respect to subtractions. Madam Speaker, if the total exceeds the specified limit, the offender may be disqualified from driving for a time. Again, doesn't give us really timelines in terms of the breakdowns, in terms of when you accumulate the 10 to 14 category, in terms of we hear about the 6 months in one instance. But when you look again at jurisprudence that exists in some of our Commonwealth countries, they look at a prolonged period, Madam Speaker, especially for the 18 to 35 age group. Madam Speaker, demerit points are accumulated by breaking traffic conduct rules. Most countries uphold this system with varying amounts of points and methods for punishment, which can include but are not limited to temporary suspension of license, permanent suspension of license, monetary fines, etc. Points are generally removed based on passage of time without incident. Madam Speaker, again, another loophole, because in some of the other jurisdictions, and I will list some of them, when it deals with the issues of incident while you have been accumulating these demerit points, it also carries jail terms, Madam Speaker. And again, this is an area that has not been addressed in this particular piece of legislation. Keep in mind that the demerit point system or the penalty point system does not cover major offenses, as the Honorable Attorney General has said, but really it is something that should be considered because of the fact in several other areas, several other countries, some of these very issues, serious offenses such as hit and runs, drug driving, crashes causing death, will definitely not be judged under this system as the law relates with respect to this particular bill. But it is something that should be considered when you look at other jurisdictions, Madam Speaker. Another loophole that this bill does not address, again, the member for San Fernando West tells us, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Madam Speaker, we have been here for close to 2 years, and we have been hearing that mantra over and over and over again. That they bring a piece of legislation, you amend 1 or 2 pieces of the Parent Act, but it has so many loopholes to it that it does not really deal in substance with some of the failed systems that you expect this to function and work in. Madam Speaker, I do not dispute that some of these matters contained in the bill will be of beneficial interest to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. However, what I remain most constant and concerned about is process and fixing the system. Our system has been synonymously known with corruption and bribery in licensing. And therefore, whatever we do today,
I'll ask you to move on, please.
Sure, Madam Speaker. Whatever we do today, Madam Speaker, and I'll move on from that, we must fix that. The bill seeks to introduce a red light camera system similar to other parts of the world. That once a red light is broken, your ticket will be issued via the mail through a tracking service. Madam Speaker, while we're on the point of the camera red light service, I would also hope that the AG and the Minister of National Security would advise us of the status of the operations of the CCTV camera system that was put into effect throughout Trinidad and Tobago under People's Partnership Government to help in the fight of more serious crimes. Madam Speaker, let us first deal with what appears to be the most troubling issue for the motoring public with respect to this bill, and that is the violations in respect to the proposed fee structures. Now, Madam Speaker, a few Tuesdays ago, the proposed amendments on the Motor Vehicle and Traffic Act were approved by members of the Senate. The changes, particularly the increases in fines, are already being met with opposition from some members of the public. And yesterday, Madam Speaker, I saw it was TV6 that ran with a story saying that the Minister of Works and Transport, the Honourable Minister Rohan Sinanan, is advising citizens not to panic as the amendments are not yet law. And Madam Speaker, as I go through some of those, I would hope, again, someone from the government side will tell us whether or not these violations in terms of the fee structures are really the intentions of the government and that they are fixed on these positions, or whether or not they will be open to reviewing them in the context of other areas.
Honourable Member, your original speaking time is now spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes if you intend to avail yourself of it. You may proceed.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, for a first-time offender, according to this bill, who breaks a red light will be charged for 5,000 Trinidad and Tobago dollars for their first violation. The second violation will cost 7,000 Trinidad and Tobago dollars. Madam Speaker, some in this country have described and likened the fee structures in many different ways. But Madam Speaker, for the same offense in the US, this is a fee structure. $100 US out of 42 states in the US, $100 US to $300 US for the first offense. $200 to $500 US for the second offense in 18 months. $500 US for the third offense in 18 months. Madam Speaker, in the UK, this is a fee structure. For the first violation is 100 sterling with demerit points accumulated at 3 points. For a second infraction, it is 150 sterling pounds. Madam Speaker, in Canada, as of January 1st, 2010, the set fine for running a red light detected by a camera system was increased to $260 plus a $60 victim charge and a $5 court cost. The payable is now $325. Prior to the increase, the set fine was $155 plus a $35 victim surcharge. That is Canadian dollars. Madam Speaker, the Attorney General spoke much about Jamaica. And he gave us one of their anecdotes or analogies where he said that in Jamaica, they say that while you're flying the plane, you build the plane. But Madam Speaker, again, he told us about the software and that he observed the legislation and how it's working across here. But he really cherry-picked what areas he wanted to address. You know, Madam Speaker, in Jamaica, they moved, with respect to the red light camera system, they moved from 1,000 Jamaican dollars just recently for a red light violation to 24,000 Jamaican dollars. Madam Speaker, 1,000 Jamaican dollars is about $8 US. And now that is moved to 24,000 Jamaican dollars, which is now 185 US dollars, roughly. Madam Speaker, when these figures are compared to what the government of Trinidad and Tobago is proposing, you see an astronomical hike, in some cases 400 and 500% increases. I'm advised, Madam Speaker, that the government is looking at profiteering at over $20 million at each intersection. Madam Speaker, let us look at some of the other violations the bill proposes. A fine of obstructing traffic wardens to be increased to $10,000. When you look at the British model, the fine is £70, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, no wonder the average citizen feels like this is more about money-making rather than improving the system. Madam Speaker, the countries that use the red light camera system have trained officers. They review every picture to verify vehicle information and ensure that the vehicle is in violation. Tickets are mailed, as we said, Madam Speaker. There are no mention of whether such a system will be put in place here. And I know these concerns were raised in the Senate, Madam Speaker. I know Senator Rambachan and Srikisun and Senator Khadija Amin also raised some of these issues. And Madam Speaker, the Attorney General, having admitted that the entire issue of a tribunal, an independent tribunal, to look at some of these areas where people feel aggrieved has not been properly thought out. Madam Speaker, in dealing with the traffic violations, providing a course of redress for those who believe that the ticketing or imposition of fines and sentences are unjust, as I said, there is very little course for redress. In parts of the bill, Madam Speaker, you are penalized even further if you contest the matter in a court of law. Madam Speaker, these astronomical fines will see high numbers of persons contesting these violations. Madam Speaker, what you may see happening is actually more cases before the courts have said. I suggest that in order to bring public trust and confidence in supporting the legislation, that a traffic penalty tribunal, and if you look at England and Wales, they were able to establish this traffic penalty tribunal, which comprised individually appointed independent adjudicators and a small team of administrative staff who work on their behalf. Madam Speaker, the adjudicators consider appeals in relation to the penalties and some of the offences and violations that were attempted to deal with. And they looked at several ways that they can do this. They looked at the e-decision, which is like a postal through the email service that you can plead your case. Madam Speaker, do you know, as it is in the law right now of Trinidad and Tobago, the police officers are required to provide evidence if you have contesting. And as the Honorable Attorney General rightfully said, that the police officers would be required to provide evidence, they could be questioned, cross-examined, etc. Madam Speaker, you have traffic wardens, and you have licensing officers who also issue these traffic offences through tickets and so on. Madam Speaker, in the law, it does not provide for them to be called before the courts. It does not provide for them to justify their actions or to be cross-examined. And this, again, is another loophole feature that exists in this bill to demonstrate that this bill really has not been totally well thought out. And Madam Speaker, I have listed several loopholes that exist in the bill. While we say that the intention of members opposite may be a good one, while the rest of the country may be questioning whether or not this is a Ponzi scheme, a money-making scheme, I see merit in some of these, Madam Speaker, but it can only work if they change the corrupt system that we have inherited and address the loopholes that exist in the law. Madam Speaker, another way of that tribunal working is through telephone hearings. Another way is through the face-to-face interactions. You know, Madam Speaker, as I wrap up, we speak so much about this demerit point system, and the Honourable Member for San Fernando, West Attorney General, said that ad nauseum, so many administrations that spanned with respect to the demerit system. Madam Speaker, let us look at some of the areas that should have been addressed in this particular piece of legislation that deals with the demerit point, especially that does not really give effect through this legislation. Madam Speaker, when you look at 43 of the states in the United States, you look at 6 of the provinces in Canada, you look at the Jamaican model, you look at the New Zealand model with respect to the demerit point system. These are some of the issues that is addressed that is not contained in this bill, Madam Speaker. And again, while the Honourable Attorney General wanted to give us comfort and say, well, yes, I have looked at all these jurisdictions, and because we share their jurisprudence and so on, it can work here as well. Again, cherry-picking what he wanted to tell us with respect to the other areas in terms of the shared jurisprudence, but again, leaving out a majority of violations and offences in some instances that this bill does not address. Madam Speaker, again, I raise the issue, and the AG must tell us, why can't we look at negligent homicide with respect to the demerit point system? Why can't we look at driving while privilege to do so is suspended or revoked, which carries 6-point demerit system in many countries that we share the same jurisprudence that we are looking at advancing here today in this Parliament, Madam Speaker. Operating with foreign driver's license when privilege suspended or revoked by the state, 2 points. Driving while under the influence of intoxicating liquor. Again, the member for Tabaquite told you the statistics with respect to the consumption of alcohol. 10 points, Madam Speaker, in many of the jurisdictions the Honourable AG pointed out. Driving while under the influence of any drug, and I'm very happy the Honourable Attorney General said that in September, but Madam Speaker, I cannot see that why today this bill could not deal with that particular matter. And will that penalty carry 10 demerit points? Madam Speaker, failure to stop immediately at accident scene where a person is injured carries 8 points. Failure to remain at accident scene where a person is injured is 8 points. Failure to stop immediately at scene where a person is killed, 8 points. Failure to remain at scene of accident where a person is killed, 8 points. Failure to render reasonable assistance in injuries, 8 points. Failure to identify self and vehicle where involved in an accident, 4 points. Failure to submit written report of accident within 10 days, Madam Speaker, 4 points. Holding a race or speed contest on a highway without written permission or authority, 5 points. Fail to give notice of accident by quickest means, 4 points. And Madam Speaker, this is an area where in Trinidad and Tobago, many accidents go unreported. Madam Speaker, again, that same accident I told you I was involved in, the person drove off. We had to go and find in the licensing office the license plate number of that person. And this, again, does not address a big issue like that in Trinidad and Tobago, where many accidents go unreported. Madam Speaker, we have to look at careless driving, which carries 2 points in many of these jurisdictions. Reckless driving carrying 5 points. Eluding police officers, 5 points. Failure to stop immediately at property damage accident scene, 4 points. Madam Speaker, failure to remain at speeding intersections, restricted speeding zones, 3 points. Speeding 25 miles per hour, urban district, 3 points. Madam Speaker, as I've indicated, there are other areas that really should be addressed in the demerit point system. Failure to reduce speed when approaching intersection, 3 points. Speeding 55 miles per hour, 3 points. Speeding limit established by motor vehicles divisions, 3 points. Failure to pull over when operating slow-moving vehicles. And again, the member for Tabaquite raised this, which causes serious accidents in some of these carriageways that cannot accommodate dual vehicles on the in the same direction. Speeding at 60 miles per hour, truck limit. And again, the member for Tabaquite touched a little bit on that, but this bill does not address that, while many of the jurisdictions that the AG looked at carries 3 points. Madam Speaker, violation in use of a temporary driver's permit, another serious problem among young offenders in this country, carries 2 points in many of the other jurisdictions. Failure of persons to subject themselves to traffic control at a roadblock, 2 points. Towing more than one vehicle in combination, 2 points. And again, we must look at some of these companies who are involved, the used car dealers, as well as those who are involved with new vehicles, Madam Speaker. They too must be held accountable for their actions. Many times we drive and we see them in tow with several vehicles, Madam Speaker, and it is a violation. And Madam Speaker, if we do not look holistically, as I've indicated, I've gone at great pains, Madam Speaker, to do a lot of research to show you that the fee structures that exist in many countries are much higher than what is being proposed. The violations that exist in this particular bill does not deal with many of the problems that exist with respect to motor vehicle issues in this country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, again, while there are good things in the bill, while it does have some merit, I can't help but feel, Madam Speaker, that somebody somewhere was being very lazy, Madam Speaker. And therefore, it was the onus of the Honorable Attorney General to not fall into that lazy mode and bring a piecemeal bill to the Parliament. It should really have looked at all of these violations I've said and not look to score either cheap political points by giving the public the assurance that we are dealing with the Motor Vehicle Authority, or that they are looking to create more avenues for revenue streams. I hope, Madam Speaker, that the intentions are noble, that they look at some of the violations that exist in other jurisprudence in some of the countries that I have mentioned in terms of turning the violations into offenses. As far as I've seen, Madam Speaker, this bill requires a lot more clarity. The Attorney General and other members opposite have more questions than answers that they have provided. And I really hope, Madam Speaker, that today that we would hear that the other members will ventilate some of the shortcomings that are provided in this bill. But it is my view, and those of us on this side, that some of the good things that were contained in the original People's Partnership Bill would be advanced here, Madam Speaker, to change the lives positively of the motoring public and not just seek to impose more hardship on a society that is already feeling the burdens of an incompetent government. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Laventille West.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for recognizing me on this occasion. Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I have just listened to our colleague, the member for Princestown. I must say, if he was driving and I was a traffic warden or police officer, I would have taken away every point and disqualified him thereafter. Madam Speaker, I say so, and before I get into the reasons really why I say so, he commended us, he commended to us, to this House, example after example about situations in the USA, I only want to remind him, the member for Princestown, that in the United States, taxes are very, very important. They passed legislation we call FACTA. They needed our support, and they opposed it. Now he's commending the United States to us. I know, kicking and screaming, under public pressure.
Honest West, remember you're in the position of the whip today, please.
So I really am not too interested in hearing anyone on that side comment things from the United States. This is Trinidad and Tobago. This is a bill, the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2017, presented here by the government of Trinidad and Tobago through the lips of the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago. And while I'm on the member for Princestown, in Schedule 8 of this bill, at page 42, in Schedule 8, there are, just for the listeners and the viewers, there are a host of descriptions of traffic violations or offenses, all listed here. In the second column, the relevant section or regulation. In the third column, the fixed penalty amount. And in the fourth column, the demerit points. For an example, at number 1, using or altering a motor vehicle or trailer for a purpose not authorized by the registration or licensing authority in breach of the particular section, the fixed penalty is $1,000 and the demerit points is 3. And it's all listed here. The other matter I must raise en passant is that I heard my friend from Princestown telling us about the number of things he discerned are not addressed in this. One bill, as we told them sometime recently, cannot address everything. There is already in place the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850. This is merely an amendment to deal with particular issues, and some of the matters that the member for Princestown raised are already well taken care of in the parent legislation, which obviously he didn't take time to look at. So I would like to dismiss him and disqualify him if I had the opportunity so to do, had he been a driver. I want to focus some of my presentation on a contribution made by the member for Tabaquite. He pronounced very potently that people are on payrolls in this country, all across the system, and are not being paid. It's the only thing, are not working earnestly for those incomes. And that is largely part of the problem and the reasons for the problems we face in Trinidad and Tobago. It's the only thing I could easily agree with the member for Tabaquite on. I agree. I entirely agree. He mentioned, Madam Speaker, and again I pass that MVA building, which some people call a shed of shame, but you see, we have done something about it. We spent, since we came to government, just about $3.5 million on roofing works, on flooring works, to make it habitable, to permit public servants to go in there to work. That was a building that was supposed to have cost this country $45 million, wound up costing us $249 million. And when I was the Minister of Works and Transport, and I demanded the file on that matter, having gone into that office, I got a file as thin as this. Threadbare file. Can't find important documents. But that is not the end of the matter. What est monsieur est patient. And my friend from Tabaquite spoke about goals and monitoring. Well, there are members of the public of Trinidad and Tobago who would discern or who would think that the main goal of the past government was to empty the treasury. Because we inherited, I could support that easily. This government inherited a very trying set of financial circumstances. A very trying set of financial circumstances, which we are plowing through at the moment, to a very impatient citizenry, but to largely a very patient and understanding citizenry to whom we give some commendation. And the expenses on that building are not yet finished. I am advised by the current minister that work is ongoing after $249 million for a small building. But as I say, it ain't finished yet. And as for cable barriers, the Minister of Works and Transport within recent times on 3 occasions made public pronouncements in this country that when and where damage is caused by negligent drivers to those barriers, given the cost of the repair, the high cost of repairs, they will be made to account. That wasn't done before, not even when my friend from Tabaquite was Minister of Works. And as Minister of Public Utilities, I got myself a legal opinion a few months ago as regards damage to TNTEX property by errant drivers as well. And the law now exists such that the state could intervene as a third party in such legislation and stake a claim. It has never been done. And the Minister of Works and Transport has promised that that will now be a thing of the past, and the government will exact its price from the insurance companies and the errand drivers going forward. So my friend from Tabaquite raised it. I want to let him know it will be done, never before, when he was there. So, Madam Speaker, let me press on with my thing, and I'll come to the member for Tabaquite later if I find some time. Madam Speaker, this bill, generally, it is to introduce a system of traffic violations for certain breaches of the Act and to provide for the implementation of red light camera system, a demerit point system, and a reformed fixed penalty system and related proceedings and related matters. When I peruse the terms of this bill, it is a most elaborate and magnificent piece of legal infrastructure, absolutely well laid out. You have heard arguments about the breach of the Constitution, as if they don't understand that the Constitution says that certain provisions can be infringed not only in accordance with Surat and the Northern Construction case, where you don't always need a special majority, but once there is due process, because the constitutional provision that they raised in Section 5, I think it was, talks about due process. This bill is an elaborate labyrinth, a structure. I'm sorry, Madam Speaker.
Yes, please.
Architecture. It's more than that, you know. It's a tapestry, legal tapestry. Because when I look in there, due process falls all over me. And you know, Madam Speaker, it is there for all to see. All to see, particularly in the new section 88A, where in particular there are provisions for where a person or an offender fails to file the notice to contest. And that notice to contest is simply a situation where the offender is saying, I will not, well, effectively, I'm not pleading guilty, I'm not paying this fine because I have something in this to contest. He is now made to file a notice to contest. As it now stands, he doesn't have to do that because the weaknesses in the current system gave him an advantage. This notice to contest takes away that advantage where he could simply sit and rely on the weakness of the structure. He now has to actively and practically file this notice. And if he does not, then the whole labyrinth of which I spoke, the whole structure in Section 88B, the new Section 88B, as an amendment, outlines the due process in subclauses 1A to F. Magnificent. And I commend it to the member for Princess Tong as well. But Madam Speaker, we formed, while this product represents 2 years, almost 2 years of serious work in this area. Before I left the ministry, we formed a group of professionals, including the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, elements of the licensing division, the judiciary. They walked all the way through and supported the wisdom of the due process provisions, in particular in the measures as I've just described them. TT Post, because this requires on a proper postal system in order to send citations via the mail. the Ministry of Public Administration, the Office of the Attorney General naturally, and quite naturally, even more so, the Ministry of Works and Transport, the ministry out of which this comes. This team worked very closely and diligently together over a 2-year period. And when I say diligently, I mean that. I myself participated in a number of the sessions in order to bring this to the refinement that it has now come to. It was a process of consultation and to define, and in some cases to redefine, a comprehensive implementation strategy in advance of passage of this legislation. So when this legislation is passed with the support of my friends on the other side, implementation follows as naturally as Thursday follows Wednesday.
Honorable members, it is now 4:30. We shall take the suspension. This House shall resume at 5 o'clock.